Hi everyone, I'm back. It's your girl Jaymie, Scorpio AF Astrologer. I know I've been absent online. That's because I've been doing a lot of stuff off screen. I'm teaching astrology now. And for those of you who aren't local to Los Angeles where you can't attend my live classes, I'm putting together an online academy, so keep an eye out for that. And I've also been doing a lot more collabs, and this is my third medical collab because I love medical stuff. I've been trained as a medical astrologer, but because I don't have a medical background, I always find the best, most amazing medical practitioners to do collabs with. And today I'm super excited to be introducing Dr. Erica Robinson, who is such a gift to the ADHD community. For those of you who are working on managing it and stuff, we have so many amazing things to share with you. Erica is a naturopath doctor, an ADHD coach. She did her undergrad in neuroscience. She's a certified personal fitness trainer. I believe she's also certified as a coach, and she has offered acupuncture in her private practice. So this is a woman who really hyper fixates and is a very high functioning ADHD. And so I've never met anyone who has just such a diverse knowledge and understanding of like the best type of testings and what works and what doesn't for every individual brain. There are 7 different types of ADHD brains. So this is really like, she's got such amazing insights. I cannot tell you how wonderful she is. And if you've seen my first collab with one of Lotta's collaborators, the medical astrology doctor, Maria Johnson, she's an emergency doctor, a former surgeon, and an Ayurvedic practitioner. So those are very, very high standards. So, you know, after bringing her on and I'm like, oh, Erica knows her shit. Like I really I can't tell you, we have so much we're going to get into. Erica is one of the best neurodivergents you'll ever meet, and someone that I'm really grateful to call a good friend of mine. I've also been her patient and client, so I can really tell you how important it is. This information is amazing for aspiring and existing entrepreneurs because ADHD sustainability plays such a huge role, and it's something that she and I know about because we actually met in a business coaching, content creating program, and we both had to really manage our ADHD. And so Erica's approach, which she'll talk about more in a little bit once I actually let you talk, but I'm not finished like giving you accolades, is that Erica provides her approaches and natural remedies and relief in managing and treating your ADHD in a way that's really inclusive. It works for everyone. And it's my favorite thing about it is that it's it's sustainably successful for every individual because of how custom tailored and personalized Erica is. And I'm going to be sharing with you based on like my experience and things like that. But basically, like Erica will consider like your specific deficiencies. I'm going to tell you like, you know, what she analyzed, what I learned through the lab results, and based on those deficiencies, specific medication, and then kind of like talking to her about like my budget and my lifestyle and what's actually sustainable. She sort of tweaked it for me and gives you like a lot of protocols, treatment options and stuff. So there is something for everyone in a way that's very sustainable. You have to be realistic. Erica is a mom herself. She got 4 kids and a newborn, so, and a business and a life. So, you know, it's like you have all of these things. So you're very realistic. I love how you take a holistic approach, but you're very objective and reality based. And I do want to talk about something that you did mention about like some constructive criticism of both in the traditional medical community and the holistic community in the naturopathic community, because this is why I really wanted to do this collab, is that there's so much misinformation, distorted information, a lack of information where people are unable to make informed decisions. They don't have, you know, full understanding of things. So I wanted to jump on here. And you guys, like, you know, we're both ADHD people. So, and we have our Mercury in Aquarius. So we love to talk and share and info dump. So everyone's going to get something and some value where you can implement something and see results. But I'm also really excited to share with you guys just a sneak peek of like Erica's course to kind of cover, like to show you what she covers and stuff. So obviously she's going to cover like the, ADHD clinical medical aspect of things, like nutritional insights, lifestyle supplements, some insights into like the pharmaceutical medications as well, and a bunch of questions that I'm going to ask. And then I'm going to share with you the experience that I had as your patient and client, as well as the astrological and spiritual aspects of it, because we're spiritual beings here to have a human experience, and it's really important to balance both of them. So every so often, I'm going to mention like certain astrological aspects that you could like, that I might be like, if you were experiencing this, you might have these placements. I'm obviously not going to diagnose you, but there's definitely correlations that can be really informative and insightful. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's really cool. And you've taught me a lot too about like what aspects are planetary in nature or astrological. And that's been kind of crazy because anytime you said something, I'm like, that is so spot on. It's freaky. So I
Yeah,
can hear about these correlations more.
absolutely. No, it's really interesting because I don't offer medical astrology as a service because I don't have a med background, but like because of you, like I've asked you things, and so that's where we've bounced back a lot. So but yes, before we get into it, is there anything you want to like just share with us a little bit more about who you are that I didn't mention, why you do what you do, the, um who you want to help, or just any insights that you have for us?
You covered pretty well my background. So I'm a naturopathic doctor in the state of Texas. I did practice in Canada for a long time, and my training is in Canada. I graduated 10 years ago, so I've been working with people, and I was working with people all throughout undergrad and naturopathic school for 8 years in like the physiotherapy and rehabilitation world. So I've been working with patients since 2008. It's been a long time. Just helping people with what's called like allied health or really like holistic health. And I've had several things that I've always gravitated towards, which has largely been like women and women's health. And then once I had a child, it changed into wanting to help mothers and with fertility and pediatric medicine and all those. And so I have additional training in pediatric medicine. And
Know
I worked with
that.
ADHD for a long time in children. And then I also just discovered that I have ADHD in my mid 30s. So this was, I want to say like 6, 7, 8 maybe years ago now. And so this is a common thing that happens to a lot of women. They find out later in life and they find out after they had a kid. So I'm sure we'll get into that more in the podcast or in the webinar. But yeah, that's just a bit about me and my background. I work predominantly online, pretty much only online right now, actually. I was telling Jaymie, I'm 3 months. I just had a baby 3 months ago. So if he starts crying, I might bring him into the picture. He
Oh,
might
I
be
kind of
nervous.
hope he does. I want to meet him.
Yeah. Yeah, if he
Because we're
were.
all trying to pressure Erica to come live where I'm at, you guys. And if we get Erica out here, I could probably convince her to do like a live for everyone. Sorry, I know I wasn't supposed to do that, but whatever. I'm manifesting here.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think the only thing that holds me back from LA is like my partner's job, basically. But who knows? He could get transferred there in the future. So that's also a possibility. But yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's about me. So yeah, because I'm 3 months postpartum, like I was telling you, I'm a little bit sleep deprived, a little bit kind of foggy, but that ties into it too. And I think you made a good point in saying that like we're looking for sustainable outcomes with ADHD. But the funny thing is, if you go through any major hormonal life changes, such as giving birth or giving birth again or menopause or any like big stressor, it can like cause your ADHD to flare up again. And then there's ways that we can recalibrate you back to a place of balance. So it's not abnormal. It's not like you fully ever get rid of ADHD, like you can get rid of things that bother you about it, you can manage them, but you'll always be this sort of unique thinker and different and more creative than other people tend to be. So you'll never get rid of those juicy parts, those good parts of your functioning.
Yes.
It's just who we are. So yeah.
And it
Yeah.
actually gets enhanced because we're not distracted from like burnout and overwhelm from these other distractions and stuff. So absolutely.
Yeah, exactly. You can enhance the good parts, downplay the parts that are not working in your life, that kind of thing. So
Yeah.
yeah.
And most people here already know what ADHD is, but I love the way you explain it, and specifically like the parts where like, I feel like basically, I would love for you to kind of like share in your own words and like your style, because again, she's in Mercury in Aquarius, and that is why you make such a great doctor. The best doctors are actually, I'm starting my first ADHD side rant, you guys. The best ADHD doctors I've noticed are Aquarius in nature, because when we're talking about someone who is a doctor and stuff, you know, this requires extensive training, wisdom, really understanding, mastering something, becoming successful at it. And that's very Saturn, that's very Capricorn and
Mm.
stuff. And Capricorn is really knowledgeable, but it's also traditional. It can be a little antiquated and a bit gatekeepery and stuff, but it's got this foundational knowledge, which is really valuable. But then you go in, Saturn also rules the next sign, Aquarius, which goes through all of that foundational training and wisdom through Capricorn. And then Aquarius innovates it, revolutionizes it, makes it better, promotes it to the individual, to the everyday person, and is very collaborative and community oriented as a way to see revolutionary movements. So you're very much like that in person. But I do recommend that if you're looking for a doctor, to try to like get them into conversations that'll kind of steer them towards identifying their Aquarian nature. Like you want some indicator that they can think outside the box in certain ways, in my opinion. And this is literally the reason why I find the best people in the medical community. But like, for example, I had a doctor, and you've done this with me as well, where like there's so many lab work that needs to get done, but like with your medical training, you're like, okay, well, if you're vitamin D deficient, you know, you're likely to be vitamin A deficient because there's a synergy going on. And, you know, someone who is able to demonstrate that they're putting things together like that, rather than just segmenting things, is a really good way to look for doctors. But the reason why I started this tangent is because I wanted you to describe like in your way, because like there's so much information. Like if you have an Instagram account and you talk about ADHD in front of your phone, you're gonna know what it is. But like I love the way you describe it from like the neuroscience background of like, I think you mentioned something about like more neuroreceptors and just like and like you talk about the toxic brain and like the sensitive brain, and you know how like as just neurodivergent, and specifically something that I really like with the way you teach things is that you're not just providing information, but you're providing information for the neurodivergent body, chemistry, physiology, anatomy, the brain, the detoxification and stuff. And that's where I feel like how you share ADHD is like the most important. So if you can kind of explain sort of that process of like the accumulation and how important it is for us to detox, all of that stuff. Go.
Yeah, that's awesome. No, so yeah, what I'm hearing is, can I define like what ADHD is from my point of view? And then like what's involved in that and the toxicity and whatnot. So yeah, I think you're alluding to the hypersensitive aspect. There's a lot of different theories on ADHD, and I don't know that like scientifically and evidence-based have we nailed down exactly what's going on, although we have a lot of really strong ideas. So Gabor Mate is a medical doctor you might have heard of, that he's a psychiatrist and he's really into trauma. And he describes he has ADHD, and he was born during the Holocaust, and he's Jewish, and he was separated from his mother at like 2 weeks old until he was 9 months old. And so he talks about how he developed ADHD because of that separation. And his book is really good at talking about like a really good way of looking at ADHD, which is that out of the human population, 10% of us have hypersensitive brains. So we would be like the canary in the coal mine. We just pick up on things much more quickly than other people. In this group is not just ADHD, but also a lot of introverts, highly sensitive people, this kind of thing. Not everyone with a hypersensitive brain gets ADHD, and I'll talk about why that is in a minute. But so just consider that a small, like 1/10 of the population has this special brain that's very sensitive. And I liken it to as like a scale. Like say you have a body weight scale, it's just going to pick up on pounds. But if you get a more sensitive scale, it can pick up on food, and you can put your food on that little tiny scale and it can pick up like even like 0.1 ounce, right? If you get a drug scale, it's even more sensitive, right? It's picking up tiny, tiny little pieces of powder on a scale. And I'm not talking about like illegal drugs, like I'm talking about for pharmaceutical drugs here. But like the hypersensitive brain is like that scale. So imagine being a drug scale and then putting an elephant on it. It would just crack and burst, right? So we're able to pick up on minute things much more sensitively, much more quickly, but we also can't take on the weight that neurotypical people can, because it would break us. So I hope that analogy kind of makes sense.
That's
Um,
an
we do
analogy.
fire. What's that?
I love that analogy.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Like we're all more or less sensitive to things. Like I think about my daughter Aurora. She is like this Viking, and she could run into a wall and not be phased. But my other daughter Maeve, she could have like the slightest wind blow on her skin the wrong way, and she's like, ah, I hate this. It's so everyone's just wired differently. And what that means at a biochemical level is, for the more sensitive folks, the 10%, we secrete, like it's been shown to be 10 times more neurotransmitter in response to a stimulus. So say the stimulus is like smelling a rose. So we secrete 10 times more of the brain chemical when we're smelling that than a non-neurodivergent person would. So the experience to us is like magical, intense. That's why we become these artists, these poets, these creators, because we just experience life in a more intense way. But that's really important because we also burn out faster, like you alluded to, the
Yes.
burnout aspect. And so because that, we have to guard our, it's really guarding your neurochemical secretion, but you have to guard your mental bandwidth with a lot more just like carefulness and being aware of what you're spending that currency on, because it'll get used up faster, and we're just not able to handle the sort of rote tasks that neurodivergent people can do, because they don't take in as much sensory information, they don't secrete as
Yes.
much brain chemical, so they don't burn out as quickly. And every day, once you've spent your bandwidth, you need to like a telephone, like a cell phone, you need to recharge yourself. So if you're if you're burning through that very quickly and you're burning out each day, like you're not going to be a productive individual in this society, and that's really tough. And so what Gabor Mate says is, like, if you're of that 10%, how do you become ADHD? Is you go through some type of trauma, typically in childhood. And it can be like, in his case, it was a very visible trauma of living through the Holocaust, being separated from his mother, right? But it can also just be the trauma of malnutrition, like say what your mother ate when she was pregnant with you, if your mother smoked when she was pregnant with you. Another thing he talks about is the ability of the mother to attune to the infant. So that means, like, the infant's always looking at the mother's facial gestures and the tone of voice and things like that. And they're saying, am I in a safe place? Is mom safe? Am I safe? And unfortunately, a lot of mothers today have postpartum depression or just anxiety, and life is a lot to handle, so they're not attuning fully to their infant. It usually also requires baby wearing, co-sleeping, and breastfeeding, which is like the triad that we call attachment parenting. So if children are not attachment parented and they have a hypersensitive brain, they have an increased likelihood of developing ADHD. So anytime that you got any of these trauma, like what he calls traumas, whether it's biochemical or psychological trauma, you have a propensity to get ADHD. So not everyone with a hypersensitive brain develops ADHD, but everyone with ADHD has a
Yes.
hypersensitive brain, if that makes sense. So that's how I love to look at it. That's what makes the most sense to me. But I mean, what we know from the evidence is ADHD people genetically turn on inflammation in the body more easily. They have a harder time turning it off. Their brains are more inflamed and more likely to get and stay inflamed than neurotypical people. And inflammation is the biggest trigger of our symptoms. So that's something we can manage. And the other thing I wanted to say is that evidence shows a lot of areas of our brain are actually like a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old. So the part of our brain that's timekeeping, emotional management, and emotional reactivity, how we pay attention to things. Because we didn't, in a lot of cases, properly attune to our primary caregiver, we didn't fully mature those brain areas. So we kind of have to like reparent ourselves and mature those cognition centers in order to help heal some of the symptoms of ADHD. But yeah, I hope that kind of makes sense in terms of my definition of it.
That makes sense. And I love it so much. And I'm actually taking notes really quickly. So if I look down, that's why, because you brought some stuff up and I'm like, okay, I want to mention it astrology wise too, but I'll talk about that
Yeah,
in a second. But
I'd
yeah,
love
I
to.
just love the way you describe um ADHD that way, because it's so different from the way other people have described it. And as you actually already covered, like some of the next question I had for you was that, like, there's so much information nowadays on what ADHD is, and yet a lot of like people, especially women, are like, oh my God, I didn't even realize it. But like now that I think about it, everything that it said, relates. And part of that is like part of ADHD is like the way our brain works. Sometimes we don't necessarily like make connections. I mean, we make all sorts of crazy connections, but it's like there's so many different things. And so sometimes like we don't always like bridge the gap and stuff. And so that's why I really wanted you to share this because, well, actually, like trying to figure out what to say first. And in astrology, what's really interesting about this is that even though you have to consider so many different things, it's not just these singular pieces. When you mentioned that like a hypersensitive brain is similar to a toddler's brain, that can also be found in astrology where Gemini represents toddlers and it's ruled by Mercury. So it's about your mind, it's about making connections and stuff. But like, and Geminis, like toddlers, love to learn and they're really excited and they're talking for the first time, but they don't have like the strongest attention span. And that's why like a lot of the fidget toys and stuff that like people with ADHD find a lot of benefit from, they're designed specifically for children. So it's like this isn't about a judgment. This is about like just recognizing the reality of your brain anatomy and looking at like, okay, well, how is that going to help me? How is that going to benefit me? And this is also related to entrepreneurs, people who have business goals and stuff like that, which we're also going to be talking about. But basically, ADHD, if you have ADHD, you have a 500% more likeliness of becoming an entrepreneur. So managing your ADHD is really important and stuff. And like in my chart, I'm a Cancer rising. I have Gemini, which is about making connections and stuff in my 12th house, which is my subconscious and unconscious mind. When it comes to making connections, like I don't necessarily have it. And the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, which is about how you learn, process information, stuff like that, is in Aquarius, which is the sign of neurodivergence, which I don't know if I've told you this or not, Erica. So it's like your sun, how you express yourself, your profession, what gives you life force energy, your Mercury, how you express yourself, and your knowledge. It's literally in the most neurodivergent sign that rules scientists.
That's awesome.
So yeah, and that's where my Mercury is. And like I look at my chart now, and like I've been diagnosed, you guys, with attention hyper deficit disorder, obsessive compulsive disorder, obsessive personality disorder, oppositional defiance disorder, general anxiety disorder, generalized math disorder. And I can look at things in my chart, and I'm just like, I see the obsessive part with my placements with Scorpios and Plutos right next to like my moon, which is about my physical body, my psyche, and all of these things. But this is really to say that there are some of you guys, like I wanted you to be able to hear what you said so that people can be like, oh, actually that's happened to me, so that's why I have these symptoms and it's not a personality trait. Or I've had so many clients tell me I was just diagnosed with ADHD, and in my mind I'm like, you didn't know? And not just because of astrology, it's just obvious to me. um, but they're like, no, I just assumed because I'm a Gemini, and like Geminis, they're like, it's kind of our personality trait. And I'm like, yeah, there's a reason for that. So I'm not saying this is everyone, but if you have Gemini that's like strong in your subconscious, unconscious mind house, or maybe like in your sixth house of your health challenges, your Gemini rising and stuff, there's more of a predisposition for it for sure. And this leads to my next question for you is particularly because you and I have indicators in our chart that like our health problems aren't obvious to figure out. So
Mhm.
you're a Leo rising, and so and in your sixth house of your health challenges, you have Neptune there. For those of you who are the same generation as us, if you're a Leo rising, you're going to have Neptune in your sixth house Capricorn, and Neptune is the planet of like confusion and visibility and stuff. So it's really hard to like really easily figure out what's going on. And it's so interesting because through your process, you very much followed your chart where like you used your intuition, which is a Neptune, to like study things in a very like traditional, like in a very comprehensive way, using that Capricorn energy, being very strategic to really kind of piece things together. And then for me, I'm a Cancer rising. So if you guys again are the same generation, you would have Uranus in your sixth house Sagittarius, and Uranus is about unusual things. It's also the modern ruler of Aquarius, which rules neurodivergence. So um, basically for me, there's just like a lot of indicators, like an overwhelming amount that I have ADHD, but like my chart also shows that like some of my health problems are more uncommon. So Can you kind of share with us some types of like symptoms that can show up that maybe aren't as obvious or that people tend to overlook and really kind of like, clarify, like, no, like this is actually like very ADHD.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And we could record probably, like I said, three of these because there's so much we could chat about with this.
We're going to. I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
we will.
we should start an ADHD podcast for entrepreneurs.
You
Um,
mentioned starting you talked about how fun it would be for us to do a podcast. So, I think we should make that happen.
it would be so good. It would be so good. Yeah, you told me about my chart saying that, like what you just mentioned about how my health thing, here's my tangent before I answer your question.
Mhm.
Um, and it made so much sense when you told me that my journey was going to be sort of longer and more confusing and harder to deal with. So I've been working on my health for 20 years now, which is weird to say, but I've been in this field for 20 years. And like I started it to heal myself. I also wanted to help other people. That was really important to me too. And there were often times when I mentioned to you that I was embarrassed that I still wasn't like quote unquote fully healed. But I think on the path of becoming a healer, you start to learn that that's not really a thing. Like there's no such thing as
Yeah.
being healed or not, because you're just being initiated into deeper and deeper understandings of the human experience and the human psyche. And so it's not about healing or fixing that. It's more about like living through it and going through it. But for me, it was like shocking that I hadn't discovered what was the root cause of my ADHD. And you'd said, like, this is totally normal. This is part of your journey, astrologically speaking. And there's also layers, right? Like, I discovered at one point the nutrition that would help heal my brain. And that was enough at that time to heal my brain. And I got rid of my symptoms. But then I had another baby. And I didn't know at the time, but each pregnancy depletes your zinc status, which can skyrocket ADHD symptoms. And I didn't know that. So now the nutrition was no longer working, and I didn't realize I had a zinc deficiency, and my ADHD came back. So it's like I'm learning the levels and the layers of healing ADHD. And I now know what labs I need to look at more deeply and closely, especially
Yes.
journey, like with pregnancies and whatnot. So that said, your question was what kind of symptoms can people look out for? I think to
You
like,
mentioned one, zinc deficiency. So, those of you guys, if you guys just had a kid or some sort of a hormonal shift, your immune system is weak, you're living somewhere cold, and your immune system is weak, you might have a zinc deficiency. And my understanding is that even if insurance doesn't cover it, zinc is one of the cheaper tests to take, right?
yeah,
So there's
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, you can do like very basic ADHD panel testing is usually like $200. You can go through a lab in the States called DHA Labs, and they run something called the Walsh panel. So you can get that done for about 200. So it's not, and it tests for a whole bunch of things that are all ADHD related. So that's a good one. And I think it's pretty cost effective. One thing I would say is like, it is important to eventually do that to see exactly, because you don't know what your root cause is, and everybody's root cause of ADHD could be different. So you don't want to be like blindly trying to solve it with the total wrong technique. But anyways,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so that part, and that was something I had to learn the hard way too.
Yes.
But anyways, symptoms that you might have ADHD and don't know it. There's the obvious ones we think about, like hyperactivity, but in an adult who's been socialized, and in women, the hyperactivity looks more like pacing, or like you can't sit still at the dinner table. You might like serve your family and then get up and sit down many times and get many condiments from the fridge, and like you're just kind of scattered all over the place, never sitting still. Um, the hyperactivity just looks more managed. So it might look like, finger tapping, toe tapping, that kind of thing. Inattentiveness would look like zoning out at work, having a lot of daydreams, or just like thinking about stuff that you're more interested in when you're supposed to be doing something else. Um, there's also like a lot, OCD is concomitant with ADHD in a lot of cases. So you'll get OCD type symptoms like wanting your workspace to look a certain way, or you'll get intrusive thoughts a lot, especially with motherhood. So walking over a bridge and thinking about how horrifying it would be if your baby fell out of your hands off the bridge, like just weird thoughts that you're like, why am I having these? Intrusive thoughts happen a lot. Addictions will happen a lot with ADHD because you're trying to get your dopamine levels up. So it can be eating like certain junk foods to get, even binge eating, no matter what it is addictive. That gets dopamine up. Online shopping. If you find yourself doing anything like that, gambling, I don't know, like extreme sports kind of thing, The other thing is women can do such subtle things to raise their dopamine. So they'll just start like office drama or be gossipy.
Mm-hmm.
Just like plant little landmines because they want that like hit of dopamine in the workspace. They will like poke and prod their partners or friends sometimes to cause that like little drama to happen, to have that little hit of dopamine. So women is a very it's like a more hidden version of ADHD, as opposed to in men, it tends to be a little more like easy to see and diagnose. And when I'm talking about diagnosis, they use like that psychology book, right? The DSM-5, and there's like a list of symptoms, many of which I'm mentioning right now. But on top of those, you might see these additional things, right? Like signs of OCD, ODD, I don't even remember what ODD stands for right now, Jaymie.
Oppositional defiance disorder.
Thank you. Oppositional defiance disorder.
You defy to remember it.
My brain is so tired. The other day I said, I was like, it's like trying to hoard cats about my children. And someone was like, you mean herd cats? And I'm like, yeah, that's the word, herd. I'm so sleep deprived. But anyway, ODD happens with it too. And so that can look like, it can look like being very rebellious and stubborn and not wanting to go along with what people are telling us to do, or just
Trying to
fighting.
stimulate. I'm just trying to stimulate my chemicals. I'm not trying to be difficult. I don't really care about being. I'm just trying to. It's the cause and effect that it's the effect I'm looking for.
Yeah, and I think that's, like I don't have, well, I can't say I don't have judgment towards it because I have a ADHD partner and that's really hard to live with sometimes. But I try to be non-judgmental about ADHD, especially in my patients, because we're, like you said, just trying to raise our dopamine levels to survive, and to be functional. And so dopamine is like the chemical of motivation, right? And being functional in this society. So we do a lot of these things to just try to be functional and raise that dopamine level. But yeah, you'll see stuff like that, alcoholism, drug use kind of things. In a well-adapted person, I think the only difference between ADHD not working for you versus working for you is what you were exposed to as a kid in terms of hobbies and things to get into. Like maybe you already knew to be an entrepreneur and that gets your dopamine up. Maybe you love like skiing or snowboarding or surfing, like some of my friends, and that gets their dopamine up. So it just depends on what you were exposed to and if that activity is like considered by society to be a beneficial one or not.
Yeah.
Um, and then also, if you notice that you have maladaptive ways of creating dopamine, it's like trading those out for ones that are maybe more functional, like exercise or extreme exercise or sprinting or heavy weightlifting, something like that. So
Yes.
I'm trying to think. I will pull up my list because I am writing a book about ADHD, and I do have a section where I talk about like how it manifests differently in kind of weird ways. But
Yes.
does
I'm
that
gonna
sort of
help you with that. I'm gonna have all sorts of answers for you. You're gonna be like, "Oh my God, you're right."
There's there were two doctors, and like because of my postpartum brain I can't remember their names right now, but they have a lot of ADHD books out, and they identified 20 other symptoms in addition to the DSM-5 criteria. And so like they've got a really cool list, but I've mentioned some of them now, like the intrusive thoughts and whatnot. So, but that's kind of the basis to see. I think for women, it's like, do you recognize that you're bad with managing finances? Do you have a hard time keeping relationships, remembering people's birthdays and things that are important to them? Do you have a hard time looking at like a really small detail-oriented bits of text? Those would be signs that you might have ADHD and something to look into. But does that kind of answer your question so far?
Yes, that's super helpful. That's like literally exactly what I wanted. And I like how you also mentioned, I completely forgot about like women maybe not being, or just people in general maybe not being good at money, because like, or even relationships, because money and relationships are both tied to Venus, and it's like there are major stress triggers. So this is really to say that like sometimes like people who have ADHD, like we might like engage in activities that actually stress us out because it does produce dopamine for us. And
Mm.
something I wanted to add in an epiphany that I had as I was listening to you, because for me, my ADHD shows up as hyperactive and inattentive. Those are like my primary ones. Like, I know some people deal with like emotional outbursts and stuff. Some people have like an impulsive brain for hopefully, like, hopefully that sounds a little judgmental, but like there's this amazing like ADHD leading pioneer, Dr. Daniel Amen. He has a book called Healing ADD, and he talks about the 7 different types of brains. I don't remember what they all are, but um, for me, when I looked at that, like I never got my brain scanned. Erica and I were setting goals to get our brain scanned.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Basically, oh, it's so great. So for those of you, like if you are able to swing it right now, or it's like a vision you want to do, it's like this 3-day event where like the first day they scan your brain when you're not like just normal baseline, and then they scan your brain when you're focused. And then the third day, they basically analyze your brain and tell you what's going on, to tell you the type of brain that you have. And what's interesting is that for some ADHD brains, like I think like the more you try to focus, the more you actually lose focus and stuff. So there's all these different things. And so it's not a substitute, obviously, from getting your brain scanned. And honestly, I really want the analysis and stuff. Plus, it's like it just seems like a fun ADHD adventure. It sounds very us, you know?
Yeah, I would love to
Like,
do that.
yeah, even just reading that book, you can kind of like start to recognize yourself in it. And so I noticed that the way I manage my ADHD is that like the inattentive is where it's usually more disruptive for me. And I noticed that when I'm feeling inattentive, I'm eating like crunchy chips, something that's like stimulating and stuff like that. And then when I'm in my hyperactive mode, that's when I'm a little bit more high functioning. And I think it's because I engage in healthy ways with the hyperactivity. It's usually like studying or doing something like for my business or whatever. And I noticed that like another thing, and you know, you mentioned like overeating, is I would say I've noticed this a lot in like the Asian community, is that the hyperactivity gets suppressed or redirected through eating,
Yeah, that's very good.
especially people who are super hyperactive in the brain. Because one, we need to ground our energy. We're expending like the more you use your brain, like this is also found in astrology, where it's like you have to eat more food than someone who's not working their like they're not using their brains as much. So I noticed that like I have a friend, he's Asian and he masks and stuff, right? And he just started kind of being like, I think I have ADHD. And I was like, or no, ADD. And I was like, oh, you have ADHD. And I think you mentioned that like the DS, they don't actually recognize the hyper part anymore. But I think at the time they still were. And he's like, I'm not hyperactive. I'm like, yes, you are. You just eat as your coping mechanism. That's how you mask. And he's
That's
like, you're right. And it's like, and the Asian culture is big on eating and stuff. And we're very high functioning ADHD like societies and stuff. So it's like that definitely shows up. I did also have a question for you. Because like it was interesting when you mentioned that like with women it can show up in more subtle ways, like it could be gossiping and stuff. And I read an article that said that um so I read actually a few things, that gossiping was originally something that women did to protect each other, to keep each other safe. And so then the men, their toxic patriarchal, you know, mindset, they found it to be intimidating, so they put a negative spin on it and stuff. And now it has become this thing where like sometimes women do participate and stuff to be shady, but like it's the motivation is to like regulate ourselves. But I in that article it was saying that like women who are low in oxytocin also do this. I didn't realize it was also dopamine, although that makes sense. Is there sort of a connection with oxytocin and dopamine? Because I would assume oxytocin deficiency might be more prone to like the ADHD that's more related to depression, but I don't know.
That's a really good question. I don't know that I've ever framed that thought in that way. Is there a connection between oxytocin and dopamine? I'm positive there is. I've just never like
Yes.
thought about it or looked into it. Like what I will say about gossip, it's not necessarily bad. Like you said, it's been a survival thing for women. And especially as a mom, I've learned that like if you sit at the park bench with your child at the park, women will always talk, and it's a big exchange of information to protect our children. It's like, oh, do you know the best pediatrician? Oh, have you solved this problem? Did you know how to potty train? Oh, I found this device that's great for so and so, and here's a great snack holding container. So like that act of talking with other women is really helpful for our children and child rearing, and also for our personal health. Like I'm sure you've had this experience too as a woman.
Mhm.
You're like, hey, I found this great new like exercise program or a great new diet or whatever, great new supplement, or it could be I found a great new hairdresser, nail person, whatever. So there's a lot of like good parts, and that would be when you're releasing oxytocin, you're feeling connected to somebody, and that's like
That's
good.
what it was. I'm sorry to interrupt. The article was saying that women who gossip do that as a way of creating, because they lack connection, and so their way of doing it is through gossiping because it floods the body with oxytocin. That's what it was.
Hmm. Well, and then depending on what you're talking about, like if it's just these benign things, that's one thing. But then if you're sort of sharing some like taboo information or like, did you hear about that would create an even bigger like rush of brain chemicals? And so that's where the dopamine comes in. Dopamine could be more when you're gossiping about like not so functional things, or you're I don't know, telling one on your husband or something. That kind of, that being vulnerable creates a deeper connection with a person typically, because you're like, oh well, she's willing to share secrets with me, then I feel safer to share secrets with her. But sometimes, depending on like if what you're gossiping about is accurate or if it's false, you could be planting those landmines of drama, right? Or like egging up the drama. Like I know I've noticed myself, right? I'll talk to my mom and I'll say certain things. I'm like, so what's my brother been up to? Because they live together, and I'm kind of like anteing up the drama because I want to hear the details. But I have to check myself and be like, hey, I don't want to stir the pot or get my mom overexcited or anything, you know? So I think once you become mindful of that habit and you're like, I don't want as much drama in my life, or I would like to get dopamine from a more effective source, or to like not do that so much. But you're releasing both of those chemicals for sure when you talk to other women. And I guess the point when it would be labeled gossip, we typically think of as like when we're sharing not the best things, but it doesn't have to be that. We can just have good connections with each other without saying negative things about people, because I guess that's my point.
And that's literally Gemini rules gossip, but it also rules information and connection and community. So it's like
Yeah.
the shadow and positive thought. And it's got some ADHD quality, toddler qualities to it. I think that's really interesting. Something that I love is that while there's information available for ADHD people, what I notice that's really fascinating is that there's resources for people with ADHD, but it's not necessarily designed for the neurodivergent, which is like there's this weird detachment, you know? So, like, you've shared information where you're like, there are things that you may be doing that you think is healthy for you, but it's actually not, because as a neurodivergent, your body is more sensitive and isn't able to detox certain things as effectively. So, certain things aren't recommended. And I'm not going to share all of this because, like, some of it is like a part of your paid course. And you share so much like free information that, like, I have to like remember like which is like the free stuff and which is the paid stuff. But basically, like, if you can maybe kind of share with us some information of like something that you think a lot of people might be doing that's like not necessarily that we think are healthy, but is actually harming the ADHD brain, some alternatives, basically like nutritional insights. Like, I know you're
People
like, which
they don't
things
like what I
should I
these
include?
ones.
Huh?
They're not gonna like these ones, but I will share it.
On, oh, you're mentally preparing for the haters.
Oh yeah. Um, and I don't know if they'll be haters, but they'll definitely, there's like a part of processing this that's very like shocking. Not for you and I, but I'll explain. Like one thing I found out when I was diagnosed with ADHD, which I think like I want to say it was 2018. So 6 years ago now, or seven. Um, I found out that even though I was eating holistically and I was eating whole foods, I realized that a lot of plants I was eating were causing the plant chemicals to cause inflammation in my brain and cause ADHD symptoms. So the symptoms are largely predicated on inflammation. And so even though I was eating healthy, right, and a lot of like green smoothies and things like this, I came to realize that these things they have a lot of chemicals, like natural pesticides occurring in plants. I'm not talking about stuff that's sprayed on the plant, but stuff that the plant makes naturally to protect itself from predators, especially
The
bugs.
anti-nutrients.
Anti-nutrients, yeah, and there's a whole class of them like lectins and phytates and oxalates. And I wasn't like, I was mildly aware of them already at that time because I'd been eating paleo since 2010, and that's a huge premise of the paleo diet, but not enough. Like it didn't really get into what's really in spinach and kale and stuff like that. And so I learned that being more animal based, not necessarily animal exclusive, but having a more animal based diet was key to healing the ADHD flare ups. And I think I didn't like hearing that at the time because I was still really obsessed with my like gluten-free products, even though they were grain-based and gluten-free, that the grains weren't good for me. So that's, I think, a thing that a lot of ADHDers are doing. They're like, oh, I'm going to drink my green smoothie. It's so good for me, but it might actually be flaring up their symptoms. And a lot of vegetables are doing that, like broccoli, cauliflower, other things like this, like cruciferous veggies. these can all be causing issues. I know you and I have talked about it so much, like
Mhm.
things like this. FODMAPs are indigestible carbohydrates, and those can cause problems. And it can also be really overwhelming when you learn all of that. And it's like, well, where do I start? And that's why I offer my nutrition course that kind of breaks it down for you. But and this is like the hardest thing to hear is if you really wanted to heal it super quickly and get symptoms under control, you'd have to go carnivore like pretty quickly. And that would actually get things under control and then reintroduce one plant at a time, see how you react to it, if it flares your symptoms or not. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
since we're in this together, I'm going to share some triggers for people too. Is That's definitely a thing. And it's so interesting because people think vegetables are healthy and stuff. And yes, there's nutrients, but there's also these anti-nutrients, and specifically for the neurodivergent, ADHD, autistic people, like folks, like we have more of a sensitivity and stuff like that. So like for me, I feel like what I naturally gravitate towards, I used to call it a dirty paleo diet, where I'd have like fruits, veggies, animal protein, and like beans on occasion, right? Kind of thing. But the for myself, what worked best was having animal protein and fruits, like especially like beef and stuff like that, chicken, seafood. And at one point, I actually want to create a course specifically for women and like designing their business around their menstrual cycle, and everyone's different, but like for me, I noticed that like I do well like a week before in the week of my period having like seafood and lamb, but not really like animal protein, like not beef, like that's a little bit constricting for my body, where some people are like they're so iron deficient that like the meat actually, the iron in beef is like more beneficial for them during their period. I tend to do well with that afterwards, but we all have like this hormonal cycle where certain things are more like productive for us, and that's also really helped me. Something that I really love about you is that you're very holistic and balanced about things, you know? So, yes, like, you know, like people who particularly have a hyperreactive immune system tend to do well with animal protein and stuff because it does minimize those triggers. And yet, you know, we have to consider the individual and other factors and circumstances. And so, like for you, Erica, you do really well with the lion diet, which is like isn't it like exclusively meat or something, or almost exclusively, right? So,
Mhm.
and it's interesting because you're a Leo rising, and so like Leos are hunters, they're predators, and so they eat animal protein. Their archetype is a lion, and it rules your physical body and your health. So you do so well with that. But you also live in Canada. I don't know if the quality of meat is different for you. For me, I do well with animal protein, but if I do it exclusively, I get kind of constipated. And you were mentioning that that could be because of like the ammonia content that the body's releasing. You know, so there's certain things where you have to be at your body. Like you have to know like where you're at in your body and stuff, where your food is getting sourced. But something else I've also noticed is that like when we say like fruits, like these are produced with seeds. So this could be like tomatoes, avocados, you know, things like that. But there's still other things like you mentioned, oxalates. Oxalates are like a huge inflammatory found in strawberries. They have seeds, although I don't know if you're talking about different seeds, but there's certain things where it's like it's not always perfect. I did really well with like heavy on the beef, and I know you like laughed at me about this, but I'm like I like finishing it with like a handful of blueberries. Like it just seals in the food. Like there's something about it that I love. Um, but something else I noticed is that when I'm prone to having allergies and stuff, because I love me some salsa, tomatoes, avocados, things that release your histamine and your allergies and stuff, like don't necessarily work well. And I don't want to say this to discourage you because I don't want you to be like, well, shit, what am I gonna eat? You know? And obviously everyone is different. Like I'm just saying that what worked for me is starting with like high animal protein. And like in order for me to make it really easy, I was like ground beef or steak or something, you know, and then like one or two fruits to kind of see how it worked for me just to make it like a little manageable. And Erica knows that I don't like her little basic bitch meals because they're so bland, but they're very like functional. And I feel like there are very ADHD friendly recipes, which is something that I'd like to do at some point, that, you know, like so that we just have automated meals and we can just kind of put things on rotation that our brain works really well with. But I want to share this thing to you that one of my friends sent me that I thought was so interesting.
Mm.
And it was this thing where it talked about, And it says, do you have ADHD or deficiency in DAO enzyme, which results into histamine overflowing your brain? And I'm not saying that that's what this is, but it's like it's interesting how there's different correlations. So they say that the deficiency of the DAO enzyme, which metabolizes histamine extracellularly, may play a role in the pathophysiology of ADHD. Decreased DAO activity may lead to an accumulation of histamine, which could contribute to core ADHD symptoms and comorbid disorders. Further empirical studies are needed to confirm our hypotheses. But this is really to say that, like, it's like you said, you know, inflammation is what triggers ADHD. So we all are prone to inflammation in different ways. If you have strong Neptune in your chart, if you have Neptune in your sixth house of your health issues, if you have Neptune right in your first house, if you have Neptune next to your moon, you may be more prone to allergies, and that can trigger your inflammation, especially also if it's maybe like near Mars or something, then like you may be more prone to this. And so, you know, if you love your salsa, like you maybe kind of test away from it, see how your body reacts and stuff. But another thing that I really love is there's that app that Erica you use. It's like, I think it's like $8 or $11. I haven't paid for it yet, but it's that FODMAP thing where it literally tells you how much of fructans or whatever is in something. So you can start to make this correlation. And this is what I mean when I say that, like, you know, like working with Erica, like regardless of like someone's budget, there's something for everyone, you know? And so even if you're like struggling and stuff, you know, like you could download that app. And, you know, if you find that you're kind of like having a negative reaction to certain foods, like look at what it's high in, and then look for a correlation, because that tends to be something that happens. It really depends on the individual. I learned through you that like I have a low tolerance for fructans in the coconut water, you know, and I actually told a friend of mine who has a hyperactive immune system, he's been diagnosed with celiac, and based on you sharing with me like what the fructan stuff that I'm sensitive to, noticing that pattern, I saw it in him. And he actually, now this is an ADHD side rant, is he mentioned that there's some hypotheses that it's like, are people who are celiac, do they actually have a gluten intolerance, or is it fructan? Because wheat and a lot of gluten tends to have a lot of fructan. So, you know, if you guys are also prone to ADHD or inflammation, maybe that's something like if you eat a lot of like fructan stuff or a lot of like wheat and carbs, and that's why like a lot of ADHD symptoms tend to do well with paleo. And so that's, you know, part of it. And I know you cover some of, not necessarily what I mentioned, but like you talk about, you know, the carby aspect of it. I don't feel bad about that. I don't miss carbs, but for some people that's like a life sentence.
Yeah, there's so much gold in what you just shared. Oxalates are another one that like they're really high in wheat as well. So a lot of neurodivergents will give up gluten, like you're saying, and even celiac people. And it's like, is it because they're not getting the gluten, or is it because they're not getting this high dose of oxalates? Because those really trigger, especially autism symptoms, but also ADHD. So like that's another connection that we've been drawing in more recent years, the more that advanced that nutritional science becomes. But yeah, the app you're mentioning is really cool. It's by Monash University, and they study FODMAPs. FODMAP stands for like fructans, oligosaccharides, disaccharides. It's a whole acronym of these different types of carbohydrates that we don't digest well, which for the average person, they just poop them out. But for people who are highly sensitive, you might get like a lot of gas and digestive disturbance, and then it leads to brain disturbances for people with ADHD. So that's a really cool app that, like you were saying, you can look up a food and it'll tell you the serving size to like max out at. And sometimes it's ridiculous because you'll realize, oh my God, I can only eat like one date or like one cherry before the chemical in it will trigger symptoms for me. So it'll tell you like it's got a red light system. So is this a green light food? At what dose is it green light? Like go ahead and eat as much as you want. At what dose is it yellow light? And red is like, don't eat this or you're going to get symptoms for sure. And I think it's only like $10, like you said. So that's a good one to make correlations with. There was something else I was going to say. Just generally like my thought is that people want variety in their diets. And so it's about finding the diet that you can handle, like with the most variety, with the least symptomatic response towards. Oh, the other thing you were talking about was histamine. I was going to
Yes.
say with that, so yeah, like from my perspective of looking at ADHD, it's biochemical in nature. And one of the biggest causes of ADHD is what's called undermethylation. So some people's
Yes.
bodies genetically don't methylate well. That's a chemical process we're doing millions of times a second in every cell of our body. And if you're not good at it, this wouldn't have mattered, say, 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago, because our environment was not that toxic. But you use methylation to detoxify your body in response to like the air we breathe, the coffee we drink, everything, the tap water that we're exposed to. So if you under methylate and you're in a toxic world, which most of us are in, it's going to trigger ADHD symptoms. And one of them is because it doesn't help with histamine. You're making too much histamine. And so you're getting these allergic type responses. So you can do something like support methylation, like take a supplement called SAMe or S-adenosylmethionine is what that stands for. SAMe is just a methyl donor, makes you less reactive to foods, less reactive to allergic things. And or you can actually take like the DAO enzyme that you were mentioning. You can take it as a supplement, or you can eat kidney, or you can take kidney as a capsule, like beef kidney. And that has natural DAO in it. And that'll help you just digest these foods better and have less reactivity and less ADHD symptoms. So I thought that would be a cool thing to point out.
Yes, no, I'm glad you mentioned that. And I'm actually going to cover the undermethylating, the allergy, the when I talk about like my lab results and what I learned through you about like cholesterol and all of that stuff and correlation to ADHD. I'm just like taking notes because I'm like, stay focused.
Yeah.
Um, but no, I love that you said that. And also, if money is tight for you guys, like organ meats are great sources for food. It's a lot more affordable and stuff. If you just get like a slow cooker and stuff, certain organ meats, they just cook beautifully, slowly and stuff. And it definitely is something that helps. What else was I gonna say? You did such a good job covering everything that I don't think I need to add to it. You mentioned food.
Oh,
Oh, yes.
before I fully go on, I was going to say I found the symptoms that women could look for. Do you want me to tell you some of them?
Yes.
Okay, so I wanted to share that, like, if you have depression and or anxiety that just doesn't seem to respond to any kind of therapies, that's usually a sign that you have undiagnosed ADHD. So that might be something to look into. And usually when you treat the ADHD, those things go away. OCD, I mentioned SAD, like seasonal affective disorder, can be because you have ADHD that's unmanaged. Risk taking and impulsivity is another big one. And then fixation, like you were mentioning, somebody that had fixation at the beginning. If you get really
Mhm.
fixated on things, that's a sign that you could have ADHD. And then the other big one is the emotional side. So, like frustration, impatience, you have a low tolerance for certain things, even aggression, rage, those can be linked to ADHD. And I had something else here. A lot of stuff around like emotional dysregulation, rejection sensitive dysphoria. So feeling like it's hard for you to handle criticism. Those could all just be signs of unmanaged ADHD. So I thought that was really, really interesting. Um, and then attentional issues is a big one. So doing things to like self-soothe is also an aspect. If you notice self-soothing behavior like binge eating or repetitive eating, and then just issues with hyper focus, inattentiveness. And we tend to dissociate a lot. So if you're really bored in
Yes.
it, you'll dissociate. So those are the big
Yes.
ones. Yeah. Forgetfulness too. That was another one. Forgetfulness.
Well, like I know for you, you've experienced more of like the universal experiences with women with ADHD where you're a late diagnosis. But me, my Uranus in my sixth house had to be all unusual. So I was an early diagnosis, even as an Asian girl, the most underdiagnosed. And so when I was younger, I did have impulse control issue, emotional dysregulation. Thankfully, I outgrew that and stuff. I didn't really, I don't think I really know. I was gonna say I didn't really have hyperfixation, but I'm like, that's not true. Such a liar. Um, and stuff. But I feel like as I got older, the things that stuck was like the hyperfixation and the inattentiveness and stuff like that. I can't remember why I just started bringing this up. Um, but
Yeah, like
like,
symptoms when you were a kid. Yeah. Like what did you
yeah.
notice?
Oh, yeah. So I think that's the other thing I was, oh, that's disassociation. Thank you.
So like if you think that you don't have ADHD because like you had like these like challenges when you were younger where it's harder to, like manage these things as our brain is growing, but then you got older and then you are functioning and stuff like that, don't assume that you don't have ADHD because it could just be that like you grew up and then you just started disassociating. And I don't want to say this to scare you. I'm just trying to cover all bases of possibility, if you're struggling, or it's such a normalized thing where a lot of people with ADHD, because our attention span is dysregulated, but it's not like we experience what like regulated attention span is. So we just have such a harder time doing something. And we just assume it's normal. And then we criticize ourselves, wondering why can't we do this, completely forgetting that the modern world that we created is designed to like promote ADHD symptoms, whether you have ADHD or not. Like we're on social media, we're scrolling up and down, which is like that motion is stressing our eyes out. Whereas looking side to side is actually really regulating, but social media is designed to trigger us. It depletes our dopamine. We want an immediacy. We develop a short attention span. So it's like even if you don't have like ADHD, like an ADHD brain, we still are very much behaviorally operating from that space. So like detoxing our body in a toxic world, implementing these things and stuff can really support you, whether you've been officially diagnosed or not. But this is really to say that, like, when you're younger, if you had like just like really unusual behavioral outbursts compared to like your peers, and then now you're like just normalizing the struggle, it could be because you do actually, in fact, have an attention dysregulation that you've just normalized. And also like disassociating and not realizing that you actually have these frustrations and you just don't know it, kind of a thing. So that's something I did want to mention. And I also thought it was, or you mentioned SAD, seasonal affective disorder, where this is where people experience depression during the cold season when the sun isn't out as much. Like you may find that like your ADHD symptoms kick up just during those times. So you might think like, oh, I don't have ADHD. It's just that I have SAD. And it's like, yes, but what is the cause of that? Is it ADHD? Because then you can get to the root of it. And this makes me want to talk about something that I really appreciate about you, Erica, is that you have a constructive, like objective and criticism from like, both sides where, there's value in both things. Yes, but like you mentioned that in the naturopathic community, something that you were frustrated about with the doctors is that they're so obsessed with trying to get to the root cause that they're not providing immediate benefits for their patients and stuff, which isn't sustainable. And so you've mentioned like publicly that you're like, because you have the knowledge, what you can do to improve your ADHD, how long it's going to take and stuff. But then you realize like, okay, but I'm a mom and I have kids and I have a business to run. And so you're like, like sometimes it's worth it for me to take prescription medication for 2 weeks in order to get the benefits and stuff while I'm waiting for the holistic remedies to kick in. But at the end of the day, it's like really getting to the root of things is really important. So whether that's prescription medication, whether it's supplements, because it's like you can supplement yourself to death. If you're putting yourself in an environment that's triggering you, that's also not going to help. So I don't say this because I don't want to overwhelm you. At some point, I'm going to share with you like the course setup because you just do such a good job breaking it down and stuff. But there's so much information. But I kind of wanted to talk about. So I feel like we've pretty much very adequately covered nutrition. What do you think?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I'm thinking I would love to discuss like lifestyle, supplement, pharmaceutical kind of stuff. Like, is there anything that either you want to talk about that? I mean, I want to cover all of this, but like, are there lifestyle changes that can help that maybe people just aren't aware of, like steam saunas, detoxifying the body? You put Maeve on activated charcoal and stuff, and I realized I was like, oh my God, brain fog, we're prone to this. And so something I've been telling my friends is when they have brain fog or they eat like they go to a buffet and stuff, I'm just like, dude, slam yourself with the activated charcoal a little bit because it literally curbs those ADHD symptoms. Like, not like it's supposed to like be an ADHD treatment, but it's just very interesting. But I mean, don't overdo it, you guys. But It's like it's an interesting like correlation I had. So I don't know if you have anything like you want to like share with us.
Yeah, yeah, and you're saying don't overdo it. You can definitely like do a lot of self-research, or you can just see somebody like me, because
Yeah,
we can make you a
exactly.
very streamlined plan, because it's really easy to overdo it or to take a billion supplements that aren't actually right for you and spend a lot of time, money, energy, and it's just not, it's like spinning your wheels, not getting anywhere.
Yes.
So there's so much you can do. Like my perspective is natural ADHD relief. So, and working with your medications or without medications, because a lot of people are poor responders to ADHD meds. We can do all kinds of things, from like cognitive behavioral therapy to nutritional therapy, different exercises, which can connect the hemispheres of the brain, um, different lifestyle things like how do you set up your environment, detoxes, like there's so much you can do. But like I said, it's also looking at what's the root cause of your ADHD, because for some people it's a nutrient deficiency like zinc, or it's an excess like excess copper, or it's a fungal infection in your body that needs to be killed off because it's stealing your dopamine. So, and so say you had this fungal infection, but then all you're doing is like pumping yourself with zinc unknowingly, you're never really addressing the root cause. And my goal for people is like be able to get off of things if you want to, not be taking them forever, and actually solve the root of what is stealing your dopamine in the first place. So if we don't deal with it, it's not going to resolve itself just with time. It usually has to be very purposefully intervened with. Um, Sorry, so your question was what can we do lifestyle wise, right, for ADHD?
Yeah, but I want to add to what you said or respond to it is like you brought up a good point because it's not even it's whether you take a holistic approach or a pharmaceutical approach, if you don't get to the root cause, it's not necessarily going to be beneficial. And something else I've noticed is that a lot of ADHD medications, they're getting out of stock. So even if it is something that you are, like benefiting from, it's important to have a backup plan.
Mhm.
And then even with, taking a holistic approach, like you said, if you have if you have an toxicity of copper and you have like, and you're taking all this zinc, like your body isn't going to be able to absorb as much of the zinc, and it's not going to change the fact that the copper is still causing these problems. So really, these are great things that you bring up, and I will respond in more detail through my experience after you tell us some lifestyle changes that you recommend for us.
Perfect. Yeah, so for ADHD lifestyle wise,
Oh,
I would say exercise is
I'm so
critical.
sorry. Can I say something before I forget? I also wanted to say there is this book called The New Feminine Brain, where this doctor actually talks about how women have developed a modern brain because we make more connections between our left and right brain hemisphere. So she wrote a great book, and she was talking about how, like, particularly for women, because of our hormones and stuff, like medication is usually effective up to 3 years. And that statistic is based on people who are following a specific like workout equipment, because the way our brain works, our body chemistry eventually just gets used to things or it just doesn't work as well. So even if you are taking medication, it is important to know that, like, this is you have ADHD for the rest of your life, ADD. So like, you want to make sure that what you're doing is working. So it's not just about taking what you're doing right now, what works. It's like life is going to happen. We have a sensitive brain. At every stage of our life, we're going to get stressed out. We're getting older. There's going to be challenges that come with that, health issues, life experiences, losses. I mean, life is beautiful, but it's really important to really consider like what's going to work long term as well. So I thought that book was really interesting, and through my spiritual lens, I can tell. I'm looking at this and I'm like, this is associated to this chakra. This is associated to that. And the last chapter is where she covers that. But in the beginning, it's very clinical, very mathematical. She also has shared, and you do this as well. I think you do a better job of it, in fact. But like, because all pharmaceuticals come from plant life, there's like herbal alternatives as well, or, there's different things. So I do also want to talk to you about pharmaceuticals as well, but I did want to mention that. And I'm sorry,
No.
lifestyle.
Mhm. Yes, lifestyle. Yeah, and just as to like recap the pharmaceutical thing, I'm not against pharmaceuticals. Like I think they do serve a time for some people, but a lot of people unfortunately react to them too. So there's stuff you can do naturally that is just symptom focused to make you like instantly more productive, more functional today, tomorrow, this week. And then there's the root cause stuff, like say you've got an underlying candida infection in your gut, and that takes up to 2 years to deal with. But you don't want to wait 2 years for your ADHD to get better. So you often pair that with a symptomatic approach at the same time. So like, let's get your energy and focus up today, be more effective, but make sure that we're getting rid of that yeast that's stealing your dopamine over the next 2 years. So you can do all that naturally if you want to, and or you can use medication if you want to. But yeah, like you said, that was something that was missing for me when I would see naturopathic doctors for myself. Was a lot of them want to treat the root cause without helping me feel better today. And that's just not, there's no immediate payoff, and that's not very good for ADHD brains. We need to see immediate results to stick with something. So
And that's why after a while, I stopped seeing holistic practitioners and I started stalking you on social media because you were doing all of the work, right? And you're like, you could take this test, or, this will tell you that you have these symptoms and these situations. And you're like, this works, this doesn't. So I was just like taking notes, doing it that way. And it was just like, yeah. So that's what I love about you, is that there is that immediate result, because this is where, you guys, I want to like at some point share with you like my specific experience, because I resisted so much because I was thinking like, oh my God, I don't want to have to like hemorrhage money only for them to tell me to take a gazillion supplements that I can't financially and behaviorally sustain. I'm like, I'd rather just deal with it now, like at a very all or nothing mindset. And then I worked with you and I'm like, oh, that's actually not bad. Like, it's very affordable. So yeah, and that's the thing with like, I think something I noticed is that even in the naturopathic community, sometimes they give you like a gazillion different things to do, which I think is ridiculous. And one of the reasons why I love you so much and why I love Maria Johnson so much is that you guys are just like getting to the root of it. And when you get to the root of it, like Maria was saying, like, I don't care like what your symptoms are as much as like I want to know what's causing it, because you can have 200 symptoms, they're usually rooted to one thing. She's like, when you do things properly and you get to the root of the problem, 1 or 3 things should be able to solve like hundreds of issues. So
yes.
it makes things so much more economical. So please don't be afraid that Erica is going to give you a gazillion like pills to like hemorrhage money, because it's not like that at all.
It's about being really elegant with your approach, right? And like just taking that one shot that, is an unfortunate saying, but kill, more than one bird with the same stone. It's just like
Yes.
how do you take the most streamlined, efficient approach? Because like me and you are obsessed with like all kinds of cool things, including ADHD, but the average woman doesn't really care about it. She just wants it to get better and to go away. So it's
Yeah.
like, how do you just make it get better and go away with like minimal energy investment and money investment on your part. So yeah, that elegant.
Minimum effort, maximum results. That's literally, you know what? I should have introed you with that. Erica will teach you how to manage your ADHD. Minimum effort, maximum results. Like,
Well, and like, did we talk about this? Like hunters versus farmers. Like, it's been said that our brain. There's a guy, Tom Hartman, who wrote a whole book about this, and the evidence showing that we have more of the genetics of a hunter than a farmer, and like the farmers are the newer genetics. And for us, it's like we need to see immediate results. Like a farmer can take all year planting a crop and then see it grow, but like we need to go out and have immediate results. And hunters, when they study them, are actually so efficient. They would drive, like this is way back, they would drive tons of mammoths off of a cliff and they would fall to their death and just die. So hunters would take a really, really streamlined, elegant approach to then get a ton of meat. So it was like minimal effort, maximal payoff, fed the whole tribe really well with a lot less effort than farming takes. And I was just reading a book showing that like the farming agriculturalists have gone through more famines than hunters have. So hunters have typically been more effective at staying alive and staying fed than farmers have. So
well,
maybe we're hunters.
no, I mean, and I think we did talk about this, and that also correlates with our blood type, is that particularly the O bloodline, but we're O negatives, which means that we have like alien like DNA. We've got stuff in our bodies that doesn't exist on the rest of the earth, but all the other blood types, what they have in their body is also found out in nature or wherever as well. But it was predicted that the O blood types were the first blood types, and we were the hunters and stuff. But then, like, I guess civilization, evolution was like, okay, like they are going to kill each other because they're too aggressive. And so then they said that they developed the A blood types, which are like the farmers, and they're more community oriented and collaborative and stuff. So it's very much a thing. And particularly in our chart, we have like a lot of like impatient stuff in our charts. So random little side note is one of my favorite things about your course, because I created it triggered this like rabbit hole in me, is you mentioned that being patient is a biochemical thing in nature. And I was doing your course while I was simultaneously putting I was like taking notes for or creating a PDF, like the weekly information for my astrology course on Capricorns. And Capricorns are opposite of Cancer, and Cancers are one of the most impatient sign, and Capricorn rules salt. So I was like, in Cancers have a hard time retaining salt in their bodies. I mean, it's not just based on this, you guys. There's tons of things involved. But I was like, oh my God. And I remember I hit you up and I was like, you tell me right away, like, what are the symptoms? You know, like my client is also Cancer rising. We were both like impatiently waiting for you to respond. I think you only took like a minute, but it was torture for us. And stuff. But God, why am I bringing this up? But this is really to say that like, oh, the efficiency and stuff like that. Basically, like if you have ADHD, like you want to have a treatment plan that does offer immediacy in order for it to be sustainable, because we literally have like an attention span challenge, dysregulation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we need
that's
to know that it's working, that it's doing something beneficial.
wait, you
Maybe
mentioned,
tell you a couple. Sorry, go ahead, Jaymie.
no,
Before I
no, no, no,
interrupt.
go.
Maybe I'll share the lifestyle thing. I just want to check on Jordan because he's been sleeping for an eerily long time. So maybe after we'll take a little time out and I'll check
Yeah,
it.
actually,
Do you want me to pause it right now, or it's up to
Sure,
you?
yeah. I'll just run upstairs. You don't actually have to pause it or whatever you
Okay,
like,
yeah.
but
Well, then I'll just riff about other stuff.
yeah, riff about other stuff and I will be right back.
Okay. So, I mentioned that sometimes you can look at your chart to notice areas where they might be like, I'm going to say ADHD characteristic of ADHD symptoms, not necessarily ADHD. I'm not here to diagnose that, but basically, certain placements might show that you have certain challenges with like your attention, executing things of that nature that are related to ADHD. I've already mentioned, like for example, the Gemini placements, right? The Aquarius placements. These can be some of those things. It could be if you have dominant water sign, you may be more prone to a degree of like inattentive ADHD. Like if you have fire signs, more the impulse control. And I don't like to say this kind of stuff because you do have to consider the whole chart. But I just want to give you guys some very, very extremely general information here. I want to make that emphatically clear. And you know, like Erica mentioned, and also in my own life, like there is a layer of OCD with ADHD as well. So if you have strong Scorpio in your chart, there could be issues with hyperfixating and stuff like that. And there can be challenges with shifting gears. If you have some water dominant placements, it may be more, especially combined with like Gemini or strong third house. This could also be indicators of maybe having difficulty shifting gears. Or if you look at like, you know, if you're a parent yourself, you've had toddlers, you observe toddlers, or if you're like me and you just like studying stuff, like looking at like, you know, what behavioral challenges do toddlers have? Like I've watched some like mom YouTube videos where moms would give recommendations to their kids, knowing that like their brain, based on their brain development, they don't do well shifting gears. So kind of like, you know, environmentally, what you were mentioning is creating a supportive space, being like letting a kid know like, hey, we're going to be leaving in 5 minutes, we're going to be leaving in 10 minutes, or whatever the time may be, kind of cueing yourself with certain things. There are different things that you can kind of take a look at, like if you, or even just like if you want to learn to develop more focus. I do have a course that I'm putting together called Learn Your Way Using Mercury, where you learn what's best for you. Do you work best in an environment? What platform is best for you? Do you do best with like internet, video, traditional stuff? You know, if you have like strong Saturn in your chart, maybe like traditional books versus strong Uranus, maybe looking at videos and stuff can be better. Creating an environment, really kind of understanding like, do you hyperfixate or are you inattentive? Because for me, I like to just have like color schemes. You know, I want to make it sustainable. I have like big boxes of things. And I used to be a personal organizer, you guys, and I didn't realize that my demographic was ADHD clients. And then I thought about it years later and I was like, oh, duh. But it's like I have things that are like hidden and they're like in broad categories. And I don't use lids. You guys, ADHD's like Kryptonite is fucking lids. Don't use the organizational tools with lids. It's going to destroy you. Anyways, hi, welcome back.
That's so funny.
But okay, so you mentioned lifestyle stuff. You mentioned some nutritional stuff and supplements, zinc deficiency, making sure to treat candida. We talked about the undermethylating. We've talked some stuff about like the pharmaceutical stuff. There's something that I would love for you to cover where you mentioned like with certain prescription medication, they're designed to like they're designed for people who are experiencing dopamine deficiency, but because of the way it's being processed, it's actually like leaking dopamine. There's something that you were saying that I wanted you to kind of explain a little bit more. I can't remember it exactly. Do you know what I'm
Yeah, it's just the way that drugs work in general, as for the brain particularly, but most drugs have this issue, is you get used to them over time. Just like you were saying, that author mentioned, you've got like max 3 years with them. The way that they work is if you're low in dopamine, instead of actually raising how much dopamine is in your body, all that they do is they block the degradation of that same dopamine in the like between two nerve cells. So usually the dopamine will jump from one cell to the other in the brain, and then it kind of gets reuptaken and recycled. But these drugs will make the dopamine stay in the cleft between the two of them so that it keeps re-stimulating the other cell. But what happens over time is that cell, because it's like, why is there so much dopamine artificially here? It starts to decrease its dopamine receptors. So even though all that dopamine's hanging out, it can't feel it or sense it anymore. And that's an even bigger long-term.
It's like it's not even there.
Like it's not
It
even there, and that's
functions like
even
it.
worse. Yeah, because then you're like, now it's taking more and more work to even feel your own dopamine. So that's the drug response, right? And like people on street drugs will need more and more and more of that drug to get the same response. And oh, here's a hidden one that we see more often in men with ADHD that's undiagnosed, is they will overuse cocaine, because that actually is a sort of temporary cure for ADHD. So, but then they'll need bigger and bigger and bigger dose because of that phenomenon that happens. So to me, it's like, okay, this might be a temporary fix if you have a really dysfunctional life with very low dopamine, but why don't we find out why it's so low in the first place and get your body to make more of it? So instead of doing this drug approach where you're desensitizing over time, you're just naturally having enough dopamine so you don't have to go that route, if that makes sense.
And I think that's the big thing, is that people don't know this. Like people think they're taking medication and it's working, so it's been solved. They don't realize, they're not informed, like you still need to find alternative ways to sustain your dopamine, and that looks different for everyone. You want to, and even, or I would say especially with medication, but with just living in the toxic world that we're living in, and our sensitivity to accumulation of toxins and stuff like that, like increasing your dosage is just overloading our bodies. And then it's not only do we need to take more because it's ineffective, but our body is being so polluted that it's not even efficiently taking in what we're doing. There's this vicious cycle. So we do also need to look at detoxification as well, which is something that you cover in your course. So those are things. It's like ADHD is a lifestyle thing. It's affecting you emotionally, physically, socially, behaviorally, spiritually, professionally, financially, biochemically, all the things. Like it's not just this one thing. We don't say this to deter you. The thing is, it's actually easier than it sounds, because once you start doing things where you self-correct and your body stops craving the unhealthy way of doing things, it naturally becomes easier to sustain. You just have to get over like that initial hump if you have certain challenges. So that's a big thing to consider.
Yeah, and it's like it's saying from like Spider-Man, like with great power comes great responsibility. I think our hypersensitive brain is it is a superpower, but unfortunately, like the way that we're born and raised, a lot of us aren't shown how to use it. And instead, we're given a pathway that makes it worse. So it's like once you can wrangle that into submission and get the most out of it, it's a completely different ball game.
Yeah. So I think we actually covered everything as far that I at least wanted to cover: nutritional supplement, pharmaceuticals, lifestyle. Is there anything that you want to add? Because I still want to share with the with our viewers your just like a little bit about like the course and stuff, as well as like me having your experience as a patient?
Oh, I remember what I want to talk about. So, I had mentioned earlier that when you have ADHD, you have a 500% more likeliness to start a business. And what's interesting is that Erica and I, we met in a business coaching program, and we didn't do, I mean, we made money, we made improvements and progress and stuff, but we didn't make nearly as much as like other people did. Like, they were like, they were just making so much more money. And we realized, oh, wow, we need to manage our ADHD. That's like the core root of things, And what's so interesting is that for me, something that I really love about you is that I started off as a coach, and then I shifted away from it because it wasn't as specific as I wanted it to be. It wasn't as fulfilling. Like astrology is very detailed. And my experience, I would say this is both of our experience in certain, well, no, that's not true. You've had different experiences, but I think sometimes we didn't, we're the type of people we're going to benefit from whatever environment we're in, but it didn't come to us as naturally and as easily because I feel like with coaching, people have a system. And if we are not receptive to it, there's sort of like this, like, it just doesn't quite click. And so but like with you, the way you coach is very specific because you have such a deep clinical understanding, because you've done a gazillion different tests and stuff. So you know what's reliable, what's not reliable, when it's not reliable, and all of these different things. And so you're very detailed. And that's something that I appreciate. And just the more I learn about myself, the more I realize how important it is for me and for everyone in general to really have a personalized understanding of what works best for us on an individual. And so like I noticed this theme, and I feel like so many aspiring and existing entrepreneurs are struggling because they're not managing their ADHD. They're not regulating their nervous system. So you can sit there all you want to be like, go do this, go do that, but you're not going to fucking do it because you don't have the chemical production for it. You don't have the physiology for it, or your RSD, the rejection sensitivity dysphoria kicks in. Like that one didn't bother me as much, but I was also really cynical. I'm like, nobody's looking at me anyways, kind of a thing. But like my nervous system of starting new things, of the fear of making money, the trauma. And it's funny because even the coach mentioned, she was like, I know you experienced trauma. Like I don't think that she was qualified to help me understand that. So the aspect that you talked about with ADHD having a correlation with trauma, all of these things, I just feel like I really, really, really want to encourage like those of you who are struggling as entrepreneurs, really look at your ADHD, your ADD, because that's going to make a huge difference. Because your biochemistry is always going to dominate. Your nervous system we're set to what we're set at until we change it. And people a lot of times just don't know that they were supposed to, or they don't know how they're supposed to, or why they're supposed to, or the information just doesn't even like exist. So otherwise you can have the tool book and you're just not going to get up. Like your body and your brain isn't turned on. So please, 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 like consider like taking a look, because if you're an entrepreneur, you probably fucking have ADD, which means you should probably work on, you do need to work on it in order for it to be sustainably successful. Like that's, and on an astrological perspective, what's interesting is that the 10th house, which is home to Capricorn, is about professional success. But Capricorn is very, very neurotypical. And the second sign in the second house is always the resource, which is Aquarius. Aquarius is neurodivergence and stuff. And I'm going to talk a little bit more at a later time. I'm like realizing like, oh, you got to look at like your Aries and your 5th house and your Leo and all these different parts for entrepreneurs and stuff, which I do cover in my Your Sacred Business, because it's designed to help ADHD entrepreneurs kind of like identify the business that's best for them, or what they want to, how to like improve their ADHD. But honestly, I think you're just better off getting the course. But yes, I did want to talk about that. Like, but I wanted to know like your experience with how ADHD has helped with your business, because I can tell, even because we take a lot of notes and cues from each other, and you're just like, you recommend like, oh, like this was a one-time payment, and this
like this marketing, whatever email list is so much easier, you know, and they're all just very like ADHD friendly stuff. It minimizes executive function steps. Like, but yeah, like I would love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think what you said is correct. Like if you don't manage your ADHD, it can typically work against you as an entrepreneur. Like, for example, if your core reason of having ADHD is undermethylation, you might hyperfixate and obsess over the wrong thing that doesn't make money. You might be hyper obsessed with what your website looks like or your business card or your logo, as opposed to focusing on what's actually going to bring in the money. And until you correct that neurochemistry, you're gonna have that problem again and again and again. It's gonna be hard for you to like get out there and do the money making activities in your business, and to also see the big picture the way it's meant to be seen, as opposed to like getting really stuck on a minute piece of your business. So that part's really important. I think, yes, for me, it's been like one-time payment stuff. Like you and I don't like subscription softwares. We like to just pay one time and have lifetime access to it, because I have a hard time with remembering to pay a monthly bill. That's just better. Paying annual bills on softwares for my business works better as well for that reason. It's just like pay it the one time and then forget it, as opposed to monthly. Anything where I can, and you've mentioned this a lot of times too, like just set it and forget it, like put up a webinar that self repeats itself, that I'm not always saying the same boring. It's boring to me because I will have said it 100 times, but
Yeah.
if I can set it and forget it and other people can see it for the first time, those are good systems for me. We talked about how like I just really don't like doing sales calls because my schedule and my energies fluctuate so much. So setting my business up in a way that doesn't require those was really important. And I
I
think
also feel like for you, your RSD gets triggered too.
yeah,
So for those of you who experience that as well, fine. I would say funneling your money towards marketing to a new audience, like it can mean having to have money beforehand before you have the clients, because I know you've had a lot more experience with that, and I'm just like, oh my God, you're spending how much money on marketing? And you're like, well, you have to. I was like, oh damn. um but yeah, definitely if you're more prone to RSD, like, try to market in a way that's as passive as possible as far as you having to interact with people.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was
Until they hire you, obviously.
yeah. My experiment with RSD was I ended up taking a job as a nutritionist at a store a couple years ago. I was going through a breakup with a fiance at that time, and it was just like a good distractor for me to get out of the house. And so in that instance, I was seeing hundreds of people, like up to 200 customers a day, and helping them with their ADHD and other symptoms as well with supplements. And like I started to train myself to not be offended by their reactions. And I think that was like the best thing for
It
RSD
was
was just,
exposure therapy. You were regulating your nervous system.
and then you make the connection so quickly that like this has nothing to do with me. This person's just an a-hole. Like if someone walks into your store and they're just flagrantly being terrible to everybody, you're like, I didn't cause that. I shouldn't feel rejected by that. Like it's just, you have that opportunity to run the experiment hundreds of times a day for a few months. It really drills it into your psyche. So that's pretty effective too. Not
Yeah.
recommending it per se, but it was pretty cool.
Well, I mean, I do experience RSD. I actually questioned for a long time whether I had it or not, because I don't have those issues with like my clients and in my business. I get very triggered in relationships and stuff, but I did learn that it can just be like a hyperfixation area. So I was like, oh, well, in that case, I probably have RSD. Um, but yeah, I feel like most entrepreneurs have an aggressive RSD, but it's like it's almost like you guys are like a raw nerve and someone says something. But for me, I look at it like I've coached so many people or helped people that were like so upset because they were like, the person said you're stupid, and I'm just like, they didn't even address you by name. They didn't even, in my the unfiltered version of me, I'm like, they didn't even tag you into it. Maybe they just got distracted, they have ADD, and they actually meant to talk shit to somebody else, like, and so to me, I'm like, I require, like, unless you give me a 60-page thesis on everything I've done wrong, that's like irrefutable, that's totally valid and constructive, like, I'm just like, you're not, you need to invest way more time and energy in order for me to be like offended by you, versus like those are people, like random people that I don't know about. Now, if you said something, then I'd be like, oh no, what did I do wrong? Because your opinion matters to me. But
Yeah, that's so true. It's so good.
but what's interesting about that is that for you, like you do have that RSD trigger, whereas me, I'm like, I love talking to people, you know? So, and I'm over here like, oh no, I don't want to have to do the technical things. And it's like, so for me, I realize I'm like, okay, since I don't really want to interact with a lot of people, I'm like, I should go to places where there's lots of rich people because everyone's online and I'm trying to like, talk to real live humans. So that already tells me like I'm probably looking at like the older generation that's like not on the internet and stuff like that. But no, just in general, yeah, like seriously, ADHD entrepreneurs, like fix your ADHD because
I hear Jordan crying, so I'm just gonna grab him. So you're gonna see him for a couple minutes. Hold on one sec.
okay, but yeah, Erica and we've spent so much money and more her than me from like marketing to like, and at one point, like Erica had like sales calls, people to market for her because she didn't want to be on the call. And we've done like copywriting, content write, all these different things, and we just realized I think a good way to know what's best for you is what are you hyperfixating on? What are you passionate about? What do you enjoy doing that gives you life and energy? The things that are draining you, the things that you're not able to sustain, those are going to be the things that are best for you to delegate, which I think in addition to managing your ADHD, identifying what to delegate, identifying the best people to ask for advice, as well as regulating your nervous system is going to be really important. And I wasn't planning on talking about this, but I think this is going to be a really important thing is that there's so much information available on how to regulate your nervous system, but you need to know where your dysregulation lies to know which regulatory system is going to be best for you. So if you're hyper aroused and you're like a raw nerve, you're extremely oversensitized, you're super emotional. Hi, Jordan.
Maybe.
If you're like really hypersensitized, RSD, emotional outbursts, dysregulations, and stuff like that, then using nervous system regulating tools that like de-escalate you are going to be good. Meditation, some like calming stuff, right? But the thing is, and a lot of the recommendations for regulating the nervous system are designed for people whose nervous systems are hyperregulated. But for Erica and me, we're hypo aroused, which means that we're very high functioning and stuff. So, and we tend to disassociate. And so for us, the type of nervous system regulation that's actually better for us isn't meditation. That could actually keep us more in like a flight and freeze state and kind of keep us stuck, but doing things that are more stimulating. Doing breath work, which is terrible for people who are hyperregulated and stuff because they feel like they're having a panic attack and they're just like, how is this relaxing? But for people who disassociate, we're like, ooh, I'm getting all this energy because I'm getting oxygen. It's like, or, we could just breathe, but ADHD brain, I'm like forgetting, which by the way, that's the other thing. If you have like, Gemini rules like the lungs and breathing and stuff. And it's in my 12th house of hidden things, you guys. I forget to breathe sometimes. So, like, I would definitely say, in addition to regulating your ADHD and stuff, regulating your nervous system and identifying whether you're hyper or hypo-regulated. I do have a PDF on that. So if you want, I can, well, actually, I don't even know if I'm allowed to share that because I think I copy and pasted from someone else. And so I don't know if I attributed it, but let me see if I can find some information. But basically, I really encourage you to look at regulating your nervous system. Somatic therapy is a great resource. Oh, sleepyhead. Sorry, baby fever. What was I talking about? It's somatic therapy.
The PDF that you could maybe share.
Huh?
You're talking about the PDF that you could maybe share, but you're not sure.
Yes. So I would say overall somatic therapy is great for everyone. It's a type of like exercise that's almost like movement where like for example when you're stretching you're choosing to the purpose is to challenge your body. You see where the tension is and you go past it. Somatic therapy is identifying where that tension is, how you can release it so you're feeling how can you be in that space where you're doing that stretch, you're creating that challenge without that, with the absence of the resistance. So it's a way to regulate your nervous system. So that's something that's really amazing. My teacher is Sacred Geometry, Meredith from Sacred Geometry. I highly recommend her. I personally have never worked with the Workout Witch, but she's come highly recommended as well. So there are definitely some of those things that I recommend. Welcome back.
This is Mr. Jordan.
Aww,
So cute.
so sweet.
Sweet.
I'm trying to think what else. I kind of want to share with people your behind the scenes of like how you set up the course, share with them your thoughts, like share, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me just pull it up here.
Oh,
Okay, so can you see the screen?
yeah.
Okay, so this is the course. It's your ADHD boot camp, and it's set up in such a great way because it's very, overall, I would say it's very ADHD friendly. It prevents burnout. I think it's also very autistic and neurodivergent friendly as well, and very thoughtful and stuff. And it's also very like, it's not just informational, but like information that you can apply to your daily life. So you've got like your little welcome, you know, how to get help, how to do the course, how to get help, how to join the group call, your big why, your starting point, your welcome call. Now, I usually hate your big why because most of the time it's emotionally themed, which is something that Eric and we kind of have a hard time with. So I really like the way you did it because you asked specific questions and you framed it in a way that is inclusive for everyone, whether you're emotional or not. And it kind of, but it was also very strategic, and you set it up so that we can identify not just on like an airy fairy, like, you know, what's your why, but in the process, I was able to realize this is what I want to work on. These are why. And so it's like when I'm approaching it, it's very structured. I have an understanding of what's actually going on that I really love. And then you break down, like we've got like the module 1, which is about nutrition, and there's quite a number of different videos, but I don't want you to feel intimidated. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, like all these different things. But
Other bite size.
yeah, exactly. Like at first, like it's so funny because you mention it where you say like, I don't want you to have to watch an hour video just to try to remember 3 minutes of things, which I've had to do. And when I've had to do that in astrology classes, I find like the Virgo in the class, they're very, very like organized. And I'm like, can you find this for me, please? You know, because like I hate doing it. So it's very immediate and stuff. It's super friendly. Something that I thought was really hilarious, and I should have anticipated that it would be like this, is I remember like at one point you mentioned that some of the results are going to come in more through like the nutrition or the lifestyle, and before doing like the supplement, it was something, and I was thinking like, oh my god, I don't want to have to go through all of that to get that benefit. So then I like stopped the course because I was just like, I don't want to deal with the urgency and the impatient trigger. And then after like 2 weeks of like avoiding your course, I literally watched the next video, and within like the first 20 minutes, you're like, in case you don't want to have to wait, just send me some comments and I'll give you some quick things to do right away. And I was like, oh yeah, it makes sense that you would anticipate this. So I was like, oh, that's so great. So don't get to that point and then do what I do and lose half a month. It's not necessary. And there's module 2, and there's testing, and there's supplements, environment, detoxifying, ADHD supportive lifestyle. Now, this is where I really liked it. Like I ran away from home when I was 12. I'm not really like close with my family. So I don't have to deal with a lot of the challenges that most people deal with. But you've mentioned things where you've given recommendations on like what you can do in an environment for people or family members that aren't necessarily supportive about your ADHD, how you can approach it and stuff like that, which I really like. And something I've personally noticed that I can't prove because I can't quite pinpoint it, but it's an observation and a pattern I noticed, is that I have a number of friends who have done their that have gotten a degree in neuroscience. And there's something about the way you guys communicate. You guys do it in a way that like fosters compliance. And that's something I will say, like the way you say things, like because I am naturally ODD. So even if I don't want to like reject someone, I just have a dialogue going on in my head. What if I don't want to do that? What if I want to do this? Am I going to screw myself up? Or just like, and I don't even, it's like radio background noise. I don't even notice it anymore, you know? I'll have that thought and be like, yeah, I'm going to do this. This is how I'm going to do it. While there's another part of me just kind of like resisting or whatever. But you say things in a way that literally bypasses, like before I'm like, well, oh, she answered that. Oh, she answered that. So it's great for like if you think that you have like a like you're not compliant, this is very well designed for that. Again, you guys, I've been diagnosed with OCD, ODD, OCPD, ADD, JD, what's generalized math, GMD, all the D's, you guys.
Oh, geez.
You've got mindset, hack your productivity, evaluating your progress, where to go from here, the wrap up. I mean, there's so much great stuff here. I just can't emphasize it enough. And then also, like, I was able to ask you questions and stuff. And I know you have a program that you're, launching as well, or relaunching, I should say, of personalized support and what that means. So I want to share with you guys specifically what that's like. But before I do you want to say anything about your course or anything?
No, I've run, so you can get like bite-sized courses if you can't do it all and you just want to do nutrition. I sell that for 99 bucks. That's why it's a beefier module, because in and of itself, it is its own course. Yeah, you can see it right there. And then the supplement course is also its own course. So if you're like, I don't want to change my diet at all, I'm not in the headspace for that yet. I just want to take some supplements, but I want to know which ones are going to be more effective for me. And you actually can email me once you've done that, the mini course, the natural ADHD relief through supplements, and I'll tell you your top 3 to 5 that would give you progress right now. So you can do that one as well. I think that one's also 99. And then if you want to do the whole boot camp, you can do that for $4.99. But like you were mentioning, I'm going to be doing a version of it for a bit more, where you can actually get the testing built in. So you get the labs sent to your house. You go to your nearest blood draw place and do them, and we find out exactly what's causing your ADHD. It's a little bit more substantial, like looking than what your medical doctor would look at. It's a little bit more in depth, but that would help us get to the root cause of your personal ADHD. And then it comes with 3 months of coaching. So it's basically, it includes the whole course you just showed and what I mentioned. And that one is normally going to be 2K, but I'm offering it for a limited time for 1,500. So includes all your testing and everything. But yeah, my goal is really to like make it accessible for people depending where they are in life and what they can handle right now, because I don't believe we should have to suffer with this and that our only option is medication. So I really wanted to make it affordable and accessible for people. So hopefully
Yeah. And I mean, whether medication does or doesn't work for you, it comes with an expiration date, and you need more than just that. And a lot of times it's that people just don't have that information. This this boot camp is super comprehensive in that way. And also, I love that you have the alternative options instead of purchasing the huge, or not the huge, but like the boot camp. But I definitely recommend that you either get the boot camp or you get the personalized, the coaching and the personalized lab work done, especially if you happen to have Uranus or Neptune in your 6th house. Like, so if you're a Leo rising, and you have Neptune in Capricorn, those are really good for people who just like, you don't know what's going on. You're probably more prone to having inflammation, chronic issues and stuff. It's probably allergy. I mean, again, I'm generalizing here. If you're Cancer rising, it could be absorption, nutritional, mineral considerations and whatnot. If you have Uranus in your 6th house and Neptune in your 6th house, if you have your moon next to Neptune or Uranus, if you have Uranus or Neptune in your 1st house. I mean, these aren't the only things, you guys, but overall, like basically, if you have a history where your health issues aren't so evident, I definitely recommend that you do Erica's VIP version. I also do think that even if you can't afford that, you should jump on the Natural ADHD Bootcamp course before I convince her to raise it again.
I know, get
Um,
it when it's inexpensive.
yeah. So definitely that. And then how do I, oh, stop share. God, I've been so out of the, I've been out of practice with Zoom,
Me
but
too.
that's something that I definitely recommend. And I just want to share with you guys what my experience was like taking, getting your, taking the course and like the insights and stuff, so I let you know what it is that I want to work on, what challenges and stuff. And you also analyze my lab works and stuff. So you recommended like diets and foods and certain things to stay away from. And specifically, my favorite was I literally screenshotted you all the lab work that I got done. And you also recommended that I get like vitamin D, zinc, magnesium, and some other stuff. And I sent that over to you. And there's certain things where it's like, it's so interesting because like I read this book that said what your doctor can't or what your doctor won't or can't tell you, and it talks about legally information that doctors aren't allowed to tell you. So I've learned to listen to certain keywords, like when doctors are like everything is normal versus everything is in normal range. It's like, oh, something is normal range, there's something wrong, but you can't tell me, you won't tell me. There's certain things that like medical doctors are restricted from knowing and stuff. So I know to pay attention to things, but like your level of knowledge is just so much more in depth that I really found really helpful. I also did like the methylating test. And one of the big things, and this is something I really want people that have ADHD that are on an animal protein diet, like for you to be aware of, is like as you like I'm really skinny, and I'm not saying I eat a lot, and I'm not saying that you can't be skinny and have high cholesterol. In fact, I have really high cholesterol, and my cholesterol is I think like double what it should be or something. And I think before it was like not as high, and this was the bad cholesterol. And my doctor even told me like I'm only not prescribing you cholesterol medication because you're skinny. So that was just very like almost discriminatory. This idea that skinny people aren't unhealthy and stuff, which is a problem. I'm glad that I wasn't on a medication because my body doesn't even respond well to ibuprofen. But what was interesting is that when I showed that to you, and I was like, "What do you think I should do?" And you were like, "Honestly, you were like the test that the quality of the test that they give you for even the bad cholesterol, it's not really analyzing your actual cholesterol." And you said there's another test that I could take where it actually looks at the so-called bad cholesterol and it depends on how it looks. So you said if it's soft and fluffy like marshmallows, it's fine. If it's sharp and jagged, then that's a problem. Then you need to lower your cholesterol. But just based off of what I eat and high animal protein, especially beef, I'm bound to have really, really high bad cholesterol. It doesn't mean that it's actually dangerous, but the quality and the type of test that they give you by default isn't really discerning and refined enough. And so it just blows my mind because because people who aren't lucky to have you in their life might like have ADHD and be like, oh, I need to like save my life. I have high cholesterol. There are so many health conditions that come with it. Let me take all this medication. Let me reduce my animal protein intake. Let me take this high cholesterol medication. And then they might actually trigger their ADHD for absolutely no reason. It's like, it's insane. So I did want to, I just thought that was so fascinating. And, like there are certain things where like you're not going to know without getting a test, but like with your medical background, the synergy of things. So, you were able to save me a lot of time and energy. So like with my vitamin D, you're like, well, if you have a vitamin D deficiency, you're likely to have a vitamin A deficiency. So I didn't go back to to get that tested. Or maybe I think I did end up getting that tested, but there's different things where it's like you can kind of pick and choose. And I surprisingly didn't have high copper, but I kind of had that feeling because I have a copper water bottle that when I drink out of it, it makes me really happy. So yeah, I had this like theory about that. So there are things like that. My magnesium was good, which I've worked so hard on, so I'm really grateful about that. And there's other things. I remember you were looking at my methylation and you mentioned you were like, you're within range, but you're like, you won't really know unless you take like the histamine blood test and stuff. But you said that you were like, there's something you said that made me think that you're not methylating, and that was the allergies.
And so there's other stuff that are indicators. So I love that, like, through you, I was able to learn different things. And so based on the deficiency, and like you guys, my vitamin D deficiency is pretty bad. I mean, I also have indicators in my chart that like I'm pretty brittle, like my bone wise, but I had like a really clean fracture ankle on my ankle. It literally, like, I could have not gotten a cast and it should have healed on its own. And I was on a cast for a year. I couldn't walk on my foot without some sort of foot support for 2 years. I had a bone stimulator that I have to use 3 hours a day, which was like so rare that a manufacturer discontinued it. My ortho was like, you know what? I have a lot of connections. I'll find it off a truck if I have to. Like, it was a whole thing. And it was right around the time people were starting to socialize during the COVID era. So I'm going to these potlucks, and I have this boot brace that looks like I'm like on house arrest. And people are just like, who is she? Kind of thing. So I have to be very careful. So my vitamin D, I know, isn't great. And you had told me a dosage to take, and I'm just trying to pull up. I want to pull up like my order to tell you guys, like, because basically, I mean, when you first started off, like, based on my medical record, like, I've been diagnosed with endometriosis, which, for those of you who don't know, it's a reproductive disorder that causes like excruciating menstrual cramps. I have cell growth outside of my reproductive organs and stuff. I'm a heavy bleeder. It's estrogen dominance. There's a lot of like challenges that come with it. And so based on that and some of my symptoms, you recommended some different herbs, some things that like really flush like the estrogen and like your reproductive system, a bunch of different stuff. But I was kind of working on a budget. And so you were mentioning, you were like, if you want immediate result, you can use this. I think it was Estral Freedom that you can use, or you said, or you can try this other method, which will take longer, but it could potentially resolve itself. So literally, and you were like, you can hold off on the herbs, see how the methylation is going to be dealt with, the SAMe, there's certain things. So literally, I was recommended vitamin A to balance out vitamin D because they work in synergy together, SAMe and zinc. And then you gave me an option of like doing magnesium at night if I want to, just because it increases the detoxification process and whatnot. And so I can't remember, I can't pull it up, but I want to say, for those of you who are living in the US, there's a site called Piping Rock, which doesn't do, it's USDA organic, GMP certified. They don't market. And so they have very affordable prices. The quality is really good. For all of those, I don't think I spent like that much money. And it was like a pretty high dosage that you had me take. And so you were saying, like, for the first month, oh wait, you know what? I need to make sure. Oh no, it doesn't matter. You were
Yeah,
saying,
the vitamin D is high in the beginning.
yeah, high in the beginning. And then so you were like, do it at a higher dosage for a month. And then for the next 2 months, just kind of supplement it. But I think you were saying, if you do it for the next 2 months at this higher dosage, that's okay too. But you said, but definitely stop by the third month. And I just realized I need to track that. But this is something that's like super easy. I don't want you to feel like it's not something that you can do. It's very cost effective. It's really affordable. And I live in the US. I have Medi-Cal. These are tests that are being covered by insurance. So I'm really lucky about that. And I just learned so much about like what works, what doesn't work. And you also helped me to manage my expectations where you're like, okay, Sammy, it's going to take a while, or zinc or certain things are going to take some time. So I'm like, okay, and so it's easy to do. I don't want you to feel like you have to do a gazillion different things. These are small tablets or capsules, like, or the gel versions, so it's not scary. Like, I'm doing this for 3 months, you guys. Like, it's not a life sentence. Like, you're not gonna have to like create a whole ass budget or anything like that. It's literally so helpful. And like, you were explaining to me why it works and when it works. And you also mentioned to separate to make sure that like I take the zinc and magnesium separate from each other because they compete. And, you gave me recommendations and be sure to eat, especially at that dosage. Like it's very specific. And the dosage that you gave me was based on the degree of deficiency that I had. So, whereas like it was so interesting because I talked to my physician's assistant, and I mean, I trust you. I just wanted to see what he had to say. And there was something about one of the results where he was like, no, I mean, I think it was iron because you were the one that told me that I'm anemic. And I thought I wasn't anemic anymore. I was so annoyed. But that was another thing that you mentioned and made a connection with. And I brought it up to my PA, and he was saying like, oh well, it could just be that every day like your iron is like low. It doesn't mean that it needs anything. So you have like a lot of knowledge of knowing like which tests are best for when based on your symptoms as well. So you're very highly custom tailored and stuff. And it's interesting because I'm not sharing like your like this is a business for you. I'm not giving your information away for free to other people. It's just that you share so much information. So just off of the information that you share on your social media, because I have a little Erica folder and I screenshot everything, and then I put them in other folders of other people. So one of my clients refers to me as like Dr. Jaymie Yang, which is basically it just basically means like Erica's like translator or something, regurgitator. And
Oh,
it's information that I already know, or it's information that is related to me. And because she and I have so many similar placements, she has these benefits. And then she's just like, this is so much better than my naturopath. And I'm like, oh, I know, hire her. Like, so it's just like, and I've done this, like I've seen naturopaths and acupuncturists and herbalists, and like no one has been as comprehensive. And I realized that you are the only person that gives advice specifically for neurodivergence. Like
yeah.
give information of food that's healthy for people that's actually not designed for neurodivergence to treat ADHD, it's not going to work, which is very common sense. And yet you're the only person that I know that does that, which is wild to me.
So funny. I know. I just like I made a course and I coach the way that I wished I had received. There's a saying like you become the person you were looking for.
Yes.
So that's basically what I did is I've seen like probably 30 different naturopaths and worked with them throughout my time of training. It's even more. It's probably closer to like 50 or 100 when I count all the ones I trained under. But so I was like, what would I like to see that would actually help ADHD and my brain and the way it works? And then I broke it down like that. Like I try to put captions on my videos for people that read better than they like watching videos, just different things like this, tried to make them bite size and whatnot. But yeah, like tiny things. Like I noticed naturopaths wouldn't be putting like, oh, take this with food or don't take it with food, or they wouldn't create a schedule of when to take the things. And I was like, but then people don't know when to do it. And then you're getting all these callbacks and emails back. And like, why not just make it simple the first time? So I try
Which
to
like we struggle with executive function. So, and that's something that I learned through like your layout. I was like, okay, I'm taking charge. And so I have like the course, the online academy, the course that I'm putting together has like 51 videos. And I actually modeled it off of, I mean, I'm not nearly as thoughtful as you are. And stuff. I'm gonna go on little random side tangents and whatnot. But like I realized that your course is so ADHD, so autistic, friendly, considerate, like it's just designed at every possible turn to prevent burnout. And I don't even realize, because I just keep going and going and going. And I'm like, oh, she just saved me without even realizing it. So it's so funny because you're right. Like we struggle with executive function. So it's like, because I know that I tend to give information, but then I'm like, okay, I need to actually break it down so that people are able to use it. So you're very good at that. Like you anticipate every possible thing. And I'm sure that some of it is also being a mom. You're considering all of these schedules that you're not explaining everything that you're doing and why you're doing it, but it's just so thoughtful. And I'm like, I didn't even think to consider that, or you're like, here is a way to communicate to promote support from other people. I was like, oh, I just like surround myself with people who are like respecting me, or I just call them out. And then I'm like, well, that's not my problem that you don't know where I'm coming from, and I just kind of like keep it pushing. And I'm just like, oh, wait, this is better. I'm like, yeah. So there's just so much amazing information in it.
Well, so I've worked with over 1,000 patients to date, and that's not a lot. Like when you speak to an MD, they've worked with probably dozens times more, but I work with people for an hour at a time, so it's more intensive. And I take everything to heart of what people complain about in the real world and what's affected them and blocked their success. And I thought, and I've seen what's worked with coaching them. So that's what I put into my course is like, how do you, get people around you to support you? Because that's a big complaint I get from people is, oh, my husband sabotages me. So it's like stuff like that that I've included. And it just came from
Nassau.
speaking to so many people and what was getting in the way of their success. Because it's not enough to tell people what to eat and what supplements to take.
Yeah.
You have to help them like create the structure for success in their life.
Yeah. And that's what I noticed when I was doing the collab with the with Dr. Maria Johnson, is that like people would get upset and triggered by her, even though she had like really quality information, or people were saying like they couldn't afford it, or they weren't like people didn't know how to get started. So with every collab, I offer a service. So with that one, it was like get shit done. So it's like teaching you like, okay, what do you need to do? Like, what is the environment that's optimal that's going to help you to get started? What supports you? What challenges are going to get in the way? What is the best way to overcome that? What day of the week, what day of the time is best for you to do certain things? These are the archetypes of the people in the environment that support you. These are the ones that get in the way. Here are some ways to resolve that, things of that nature. And so much of the areas, and I'm still working on it, for like, like being like, here's how to diffuse and de-escalate it, acclimate, are things that like, because my brain, my ADHD brain, and all the little neurons that are going off, like you might be talking about a supplement, and I'm like, I like the way she worded that. I am going to write it that way. That is a good structure, And then I put it into AI, and I'm like, I notice how she said this, which is so much better than saying it like this, which is how I say it. Make it sound like that, this statement, and like AI will be like, here is a less forceful way. And I was just like, yeah, was I forceful?
That's forceful way.
Yeah. So I just thought it was really interesting. But yeah. So I know you told us briefly, but can you tell us again? So there's the ADHD boot camp that covers everything that I mentioned. That's $500 right now. And then you have the VIP version where you have that course and it's got the lab work, the analysis, the coaching. Can you break that down again for us, please?
Yeah, that first, you get the whole course, which you can do on your own time. You've got lifetime access. So if something's coming up later in life, you can refer back to the video content. And like I said, that's going to address the full facet of ADHD. So your nutrition, your supplementation, your lifestyle setup, your exercise and physical activity, mindset work, all these things, different therapies you can do, and then how to read your lab tests if you want to. And then it's got the personalized elements. So we do labs looking at all the major causes of ADHD. There's something called the OAT test. The organic acid test is included. That's going to look at your brain chemistry and which neurotransmitters you're low in, and if it's caused by fungal or bacterial infections in the body, things like this, your mitochondrial functioning. And then we're going to look at basic blood works like zinc, copper, your vitamins, that would contribute to ADHD, and something called pyroluria, which is another big cause. That's all included. Testing, the course, my analysis. So we do a 1 hour intake together where I gather more information from your medical history. You fill out a really comprehensive form before that visit too, so I'll gather more data there. And then I basically interview you and find any other gaps we need to look at addressing. And once I get all the information together, I create a personalized plan. So that's going to be like, okay, you've watched the course, you've seen the ideas about nutrition, but here's a diet very specific for you, or here's what you should be doing specific to you. Here's the exact supplements to take when and for how long, and the brands. Here's the exercises you should be doing, or the physical activity stuff for you. Here's how to set up your house, your productivity. So that'll have your own plan. And then it comes with 3 months of coaching where we talk on WhatsApp. Basically, as you go through real life and different impediments or obstacles or challenges come up, we talk about how to address those and overcome them and keep implementing the whole program into your life. So you should walk away with basically what to do for the next year or two to get the ADHD under control. We'll be together for 3 months of that, and you can also opt to keep seeing me afterwards, if you need ongoing coaching. But my whole thing was like, how do we get this under control, lickety split in 90 days? And like, Why I say it could take 2 years is because, for instance, if you have an invasive candida infection in your gut, it just takes that long, but it's just a supplement you take in the morning and then you don't think about it for the next couple of years. That's just unfortunately how long it takes to kill fungus in the body, but they are what steal your dopamine. So you should have that action plan, and we'll be together for 3 months, but you might continue to take some supplements for a couple of years just to make sure that you're going to get optimal dopamine levels for the rest of your life. So hopefully that kind of makes sense.
Yes. So that one is, you mentioned it's 3 months, so that's 90 days. And is that the one that you're mentioning is you're pricing it 2,000 to make it accessible for people? But right now you're doing a $500 discount, so it's 1,500, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, so just to let you guys know, like that is $16 a day for lab work, all of that shit, the coaching. Like you're literally getting a nutritionist, a fitness trainer, an ADHD coach, a doctor, um, almost like a personalized like a personal organizer, like interior decorator that's designed with like an ADHD theme, a coordinator, basically. It's all of this stuff all wrapped up in one. And so for $16 a day, I think that that's absolutely worth it. And I would venture to say that because I just know, like, I've talked to you about this, I know your quality of work, like, you share information that's timeless. So, of course, like, situations can change over time, but if years later, when someone experiences another stressor, or maybe they have kids or something, they can still reference the information that you provided and stuff. So it's something that can continue to help you. So this is something like, because ADHD is something that you're experiencing for the rest of your life, 1,500 or $16 a day is very much worth it, like 100%. And particularly, like, you've done all of the blood testings and stuff, so you know which ones are best, why it's the best and stuff. So I love that so much. And you share information. And like something that I've noticed is that, like, just because like all health issues start with like an imbalanced gut. And like, let's be real, like we all have like a leaky gut. Maybe Jordan doesn't. I don't know. Like he's new. He might still though. Who knows? But for the most part, like it's very common. And what's interesting is that like I've noticed with the FODMAP, they give like the generalized information. They're like, oh, this is green, this is safe, right? But I noticed that like, because I live in the US, like some of the people that I follow in Canada will say that this is only good in certain dosage, right? But Americans will look at that and be like, no, 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 my thing says that it's fine. Like basically they're a meme. And I'm like, but mine is giving number restrictions, so it's probably correct. They don't listen to me, and then they have all these health issues. But with you, you can literally let people know, oh, you can have more of this because of your body. You shouldn't have this, or you should have it at this dosage. Like you're very specific. So that's where it's just very helpful. You've got this diverse like training and knowledge and stuff. So I think it's so it's so, and also like, Erica isn't a business consultant, but like, and she would never say that she's offering you business advice because that's not really factually correct. But because she's here to help you to balance out your life, and because she info dumps without realizing it, like she's going to share information that's somehow going to help you, or she's going to mention something. And you're going to be like, oh my God, that makes so much sense. Why I have this challenge, or whatever the case may be. So especially if you're a mom, you're an entrepreneur, you're a woman, or you did mention like, literally when you said this, you changed my life, and there's so many epiphanies. But when you were saying like so many people like do coke for like undiagnosed ADHD, I group chain text, and everyone was like, God. It was literally, we're just like, oh, because I noticed this pattern. It's like I don't do well with coffee, caffeine, and I don't do well with Ritalin. I noticed that people who do well with coffee tend to do well with Ritalin, So I noticed these little parallels, and so then I realized I was like, sorry, but I forgot that Jordan's there. But yeah, it's just like I think it's so interesting. So I'm glad that you shared this information. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I feel like you guys probably don't have questions unless it's related to like the specific books and the names of things that we mentioned, which we'll try to remember and write it down. And let's see what else. So I also want to, oh, I didn't think about this. Because every time I do a collab, I do offer a course. Let me look at my website and let me see what I offer.
That's
Oh,
awesome.
wait. I just need to create a title for it. I got it. I mean, this is something that I'm sorry, you guys. So basically with every collab, I offer a new service. So I'm just trying to think about what I want to offer you guys. And I think what I want to do is I need to come up with a name. I guess I'm gonna have to come up with a name, but I want to say it's going to be related to like a similar flair. If you looked at my website, Your Sacred Business, and that's the one for aspiring and existing entrepreneurs, where I show you like the best way for you to make money, how to increase your financial gains, the most successful career path, the positions, the industry, your ideal work environment, any professional karma you have to work through, how to resolve and reconcile challenges, the best way for you to collaborate with others and what you're meant to communicate, but like an ADHD version, specifically for existing ADHD entrepreneurs that are having challenges in your business, really providing you with like, I think what I'm going to do is I'll create a questionnaire and you can just info dump and I'll answer specific questions and challenges that you have, which can involve like the best way for you to market, the best way for you to connect with clients, the ideal platform for you, things of that nature. But I'm going to put it through an ADHD lens. At first I was going to say this was business related, but I actually might also maybe make it related to like your environment, things of that nature, so that I can literally provide you with resources. So basically, this will be for people who are probably aware of the challenges you have in ADHD or just like challenges you have in general. And then I can provide you with insights, analyzing your chart. What are the ways that are going to be most sustainably how you are able to best resolve them? And so for this one, I normally offer, most of my readings are $333. I'll do this one for $179 for those of you who are watching this webinar. And if you want, you can also complement it between the two of us. Like, you know, after you got like after you've worked with Erica and you're like, okay, I mean, honestly, I don't think that after you work with her, you don't really need my course probably, unless you have like specific things in your life that you want to work on. But it can be something that we combine together. And if you want us to combine it, and if you want to share with me what Erica said, what works well for you, just to save us time, because like, you know, I don't know what ADHD remedies she gave you. We're not, you know, swapping notes. But if you want to share that, I can also further tailor it, looking at your chart to see like the best way to sustain that.
That sounds so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the outcomes that I'm always looking for when I work with people is like, is your energy higher? Do you have less fatigue? Are you able to sustain the energy throughout the day? Can you wake up feeling refreshed and ready to go, as opposed to like, I got hit by a truck? Can you focus better? And like a big one is, can you get more work done in less time, so that you're not you have more vacation, more weekend to yourself, more, I think it's like less work, more weekend is the saying. But I was like, can you get your time back? Can you feel better about what you're doing? And I think, you know, if we can support your biochemistry to get all of those results within 3 months, and sooner really with a lot of them, and then they can see you for really personalized, like, now that I have the energy and the focus, like, what do I do specifically for me in my business?
Yes.
That would be really awesome, because then you could channel this new available energy and focus and do exactly the things you're supposed to for your astrology, for your way of being.
Yeah.
I think
I
that would
think
be
that's very well put. I also forgot to mention that from a spiritual aspect, the reason why we experience ADHD is that we're out of spiritual alignment. So when we're not doing something that resonates with our soul purpose, because ADHD people, like, we have an interest-based nervous system. And so oftentimes we get a lot of like shit for being like flaky or not having strong follow through and stuff like that. And yes, that can be really frustrating, especially when it affects other people. So even though there is a biochemical consideration, I think it's important for us to be self-aware, to take accountability, because it's not fair for other people to have to deal with the negative consequence of us not realizing this. So I feel like it is important for us to be self-aware. And I think that it requires us, in order to be successful, to be highly honest, accountable, and ethical. Because it's like, if it's not for you, don't do it. Like, we have an interest-based nervous system. Be honest with yourself. You cannot sustain what you cannot sustain. You just can't. And when you try to, your ADHD symptoms are going to flare up. So it could also be that you're doing all these different things and you're like, why is it not working? Where are you living the life that you want? Are you doing the things that you want? Are you engaging yourself into things that you're interested in? Because if you're not, it's not going to work. So it's also thinking about what those things are that's important for you. And I do recommend to look at like your core values, which sounds really boring. I feel like I've always thought it was kind of like boring. But the way I look at it is, look at things that viscerally upset you, because that's an indicator that your core needs are being met. And that those are the things that you need to make sure are met for you in every environment that you're in as much as possible in your circumstances. So for me, my 6 core values are intelligence, accountability, honesty, intelligence, freedom, and independence. So I don't put myself in situations that require me to be committed where I don't have the freedom and independence to disengage and I don't feel like it. I don't put myself in situations with people who aren't intelligent or aren't going to take accountability, even if it's like someone can be really nice and be really kind, but I'm just not going to put myself in that situation. I'm no longer making myself wrong for that. Like, when we have ADHD, we're supposed to be selective. We're not for everyone. That's not what we're designed for. So it's really about just being really honest, what works, what doesn't, and stuff. And what's interesting is that core values in astrology is ruled by Taurus, which is the most fixed and stubborn sign, because it's supposed to be our uncompromising standards. So I really encourage you to also look at like your core values and find ways to make sure that they're being met, which will be something that I'll cover in the reading as well, but something to kind of like help you to get started. Because I think that's where, for so long, up until I met Maria, I used to really struggle with a lot of like other naturopaths. They're like, well, you just have to keep doing it. You just have to do these million different things. And I'm like, I don't want to. And they're like, it's self-sabotaging. And they didn't look at it from like a biochemical level of like, okay, she doesn't have the biochemistry to successfully sustain this, and we're not resolving it. We're not providing her with immediate results. They made me the problem. They're like, well, I can't help you because you're self-sabotaging. And then I would get really like upset and rejected. But now I realize it, and it's like, no, you didn't have the tools to properly treat me. And also, I don't need to take 1,000 different things. I can have freedom and independence in the way that I'm like managing this. Like, it's more intelligent, it's more strategic, it's more accountable for me to do it in this way. So, and I know that you're very knowledgeable about that. You know, you can be like, well, if you don't want to like take these as like in pill form, there is an herbal powder version. You can take the tincture version. You know, like, I think a lot of other herbalists, they will be like, you can't do it that way. You had to do it. You have to do it this way. And then I go see someone else and they're like, no, you don't. You have like all that information already, because you have this rebellious streak and this hyperfixation. So you're like, I have to know all of this. And you're like, what if I don't want to do this? Or what if someone rebels about this? Like, you just have like, you have all the information. I actually had a client describe me as, she said, I'm like a hard drive of answers. And I agree with that, but you have way more. So
maybe just on this topic, I think you have so many answers in terms of astrology. Like, you blow my mind anytime I bring something to you. You're like, oh, that's because this and this is happening. I'm like, oh my God, makes sense.
Well, yeah, well, it was really interesting because with you in particular, you were the only person that I felt inclined, and the information was coming to me where we were like, I was analyzing Maeve's chart through your chart, and I was like making predictions about like, you know, like areas of her brain where there could be inflammation. And you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense because I just had her test this, and so that would mean this and this and that. And I was like, oh, I'm glad you know what I'm talking about, because I'm like, I'm just interpreting the data, but I don't have the medical background. But you just knew a lot of stuff where I'm like, oh, like these specific heavy metals came from your mom, or this lineage. And, like in your case, like, it's so funny because like the younger generation is living in a more toxic world. There's more trauma, or hypersensitivity to trauma, and also like all of the inherited trauma. So there's just a greater emergence of ADHD, autistics, neurodivergence and stuff. But like for you, like you grew up on a farm, right? So you were exposed to a lot of pesticides.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
th-
yeah, we're all exposed to such different things. And when it's a young age, right, it can really affect your brain development. So, yeah,
yeah,
everyone's so individual.
yeah. Do you have anything that you wanted to add or?
No, that's pretty complete. We covered a lot of stuff today. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I know.
I'm
I
really
think it's
proud
been
of
good.
myself.
Yeah, it's been awesome. I think it'll be really cool if we can support people with ADHD in their journeys and the ways that we're skilled at doing that. And yeah, and I think it's important to both of us because we both have it, right? So it's like we know the little extra bit it's going to take to be successful. So I think
And
it'll
it's
keep helping people with this.
especially for us because it's funny because the coaching program that we met through, that coach has now been like very vocal about having ADHD. But like, and I don't know, like I'm not saying that like she didn't have to work on it, but we have to put a lot more effort, I feel like.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, and I
Well,
think
we're
it's
very
because where we're
cerebral,
at.
right? And like we're
Yeah.
very analytical and intellectual, and the course was more emotionally based, I think is how you worded it. And that
Yeah.
makes so much sense to me because I was like, I don't really come at things from that angle. And it just was harder to be successful that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well,
Well,
thank you so much for having us.
yeah. Thank you. So, for anyone who wants to learn more about this, we're gonna leave the links below. We both, you're gonna post, you're welcome to post this on your social medias, and I'm gonna post it on mine. So we'll just have all of the information for you.
Yay. Thank you so much, Jaymie.
Of course, thank you. Bye,
Awesome.
everyone.
Bye.